on Sky.
Oh,
So we usually start out with show news, and there was really only one thing that came out today, and it was the Nico D'Angelo potential audition stuff. I know Shannon's been keeping an eye on it today.
yeah, I hate it. I just hate whenever there's rumors, rumors like that, because I just know that people are going to psychoanalyze whatever the kids say even more than they usually do. And that's why I hate it so much. I'm like, can everyone just relax? And it also just feels stupid because I'm like, they told us that the show got renewed literally the second that it did. And I am like, maybe they should have not told us about this because people wouldn't be searching for this stuff if they didn't know that Titan's Curse was going to happen already.
Yeah. I, and with it being a closed casting call, as far as I'm aware,
Mhm.
with it being closed, they didn't need to announce that they were doing the casting for it. So,
No, they don't need to announce anything, honestly. And it's one of the things that's annoying about it to me as someone who's been in fandom forever is that I learned a lot about how these things are made through the like since I was like 12 years old when I was interested in this stuff. And so like just a fundamental misunderstanding of how these things work. Like the casting calls are usually not scenes that are actually going to happen in the show. And so there's all these threads on Twitter of people being like, "Oh, this is what's going to be different about season 3 based on this casting call." And I'm like, "This casting call is for Nico."
Mhm.
So they're having him be the center of these scenes. There's no guarantee that that's actually going to happen when the show is actually on the air. Because this is to figure out if a kid can play a character like Nico through many seasons when he becomes super traumatized. That's what they're trying to figure out with this casting call. They're not trying to have it be like accurate to what they're actually going to depict on the show. And so people are assuming that because they don't understand how this stuff works. And I'm just sitting here watching this like there's already so much like misinformation and the show is like 6 seconds old.
Mhm.
Like nothing's even happened yet. They haven't even gotten close to anything quite yet. And there's still so many people like just assuming things about the season and it's like a year and a half away from ever being on the air.
so my friend Alora, she asked, well, what did I miss? And basically, the season 3 was announced, and then the Nico casting that they're searching for the Nico was announced, and it's just the whole child actor thing, like the expectation that people put on them. And it's like they have to decide whether or not they're going to pick somebody who will be young enough to be the season 3 Nico, but also like old enough by the time the season releases.
Mhm.
It's so they if they decide to choose age accurate casting, they have to go below the age of Nico because by the time they start filming, they need to make sure it's going to be like age accurate Nico. And I
Yeah,
just
and
I don't know.
there's also the thing that like I can't remember exactly what I was going to say now. But it was basically just the general idea that the idea behind how this stuff. Oh, the thing that Becky made a point of today on Threads was that wherever that stuff came from, if it was like legitimate, that whoever that person was that like put that information out there or their friend shared it, that person will never get a role in Hollywood.
Right.
Like because they either shared something that was confidential that they're not supposed to show anyone else to somebody else who shared it with the internet or
Mhm.
they themselves shared it with the internet. And so either way, they're never going to get cast in anything after this, after you do something like that, because people will find out who it was somehow, even if they don't go after that person. They somehow will, because that's just how, like, the child actor scene is not big at all. It's very small. Like they all know each other, and so it's not going to be hard to figure out who it was. Honestly, probably. And so that's also part of the thing is that when they share this stuff, they're kind of getting somebody in trouble and I don't think they realize that whoever put that stuff out there is going to get in trouble
Yeah.
in some way. And it's like, is it worth it to put that stuff out there if we would just wait? Like, they're supposed to do the Disney upfronts on Wednesday. It's in 2 days. They would tell us something then most likely. So can we just like wait and not screw somebody over accidentally?
Well, I think it's really unfortunate that they're invading like so much private space of children also
Mm.
by deciding, yep, we're gonna poke because we want more information than what they're willing to give yet. I mean, the children aren't even cast yet. We don't even know who's auditioning at this point.
Yeah, and like imagine like the pressure of being cast as Nico. Jesus freaking Christ.
Yeah.
There's like there is this is like a whole other tangent, but there's an entire like fan culture about Nico that does not exist in reality. Like the things that people think happen in these books, like some of the I sent them to Mandy today, some of the things that people said like, "Oh, this is different from the book." I'm like, "This literally happened in the book." What do you mean it's different? This is what happens in the book. Like, what do you think happens in the book? Like, they don't, honestly, I don't think they know what happens in the book anymore. But it's just like stuff with him is especially wild like that. And so it's like that's already a lot of pressure, and this production tries to protect those kids as much as they possibly can. But like this kid is going to be under a huge microscope from -20 day one because we're not even close to day one, and it's already happening.
Yeah.
And so it's like the last thing you should be doing. The only way that people found that stuff is by actively trying to search for it. And it just reminds me of how Walker mentioned in an interview that somebody doxed his phone number so they could pretend to be part of the cast for Sea of Monsters to ask him to send them the script by pretending like they were on the cast. And it's like, do you know how many boundaries that is like overstepping, that you not only know how to find his phone number but also actually message him and pretend like you're part of the crew of Percy Jackson and ask them to send you a copy of the script so that you can read what happens on the show? Like, what if you just wait for it to air? Like, that's wild that people are willing to, like, find whatever they found to even put this information out there and then make, like, a PowerPoint presentation on Twitter.
This happens in so many creative spaces. Like books will get leaked. It like just I don't because it ruins so much of the excitement for
Hmm.
it anyway. When because people will start forming opinions on stuff that isn't. I'm sorry, my cat. Oh my.
It's okay.
Oh,
This is Red 40. He has
I love cats.
but like it just ruins the anticipation and the excitement of when we actually get something on screen. I mean, I don't like her, but Stephanie Meyer literally had a whole book.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Like,
Midnight Sun.
yeah, and then she was like, "I'm never writing." Well, she ended up writing Midnight Sun. It was
Yeah.
um, it was the Renesmee one or whatever.
Hmm.
But it ruins the creative's creativity. I know if somebody leaked something of mine before it was ready for its like full debut, I'd be like, of course I'm never doing that again because people are judging my work based off of something that isn't ready.
And it's also a thing to me of like, it puts so much pressure on the people who are doing that job. And like, it already is a big job. Like, imagine being a casting director for Percy Jackson and the Olympians when it was the number one show on Disney Plus last year. That's a lot of pressure to live up to that every single season. And so that's already a pretty pressure filled job. And then you add on the fact of the fandom like digging into your work. And it's just like, you don't want to think about that. Like, when you're being creative, you just want to like do it. You don't want to think about what you're supposed to do or what is like good marketing or whatever. You just want to do what you think is right. And so adding that in, like having other people's ideas already being questioned by what you're doing when you haven't even finished it yet is just never good for the overall process of it all.
Right.
Hmm.
I just wish that the thing that bothers me the most is the accounts that put that stuff out there. They don't care that they're just like spreading all this stuff and they never explain what any of this stuff means. They just like put it out there. And at least one of them today almost sounded like annoyed with the fact that Becky says like downplays this stuff. And I'm like, what do you expect her to do? Just like let you run wild and put all of this pressure on these literal children that are trying out for these parts, is she supposed to just like eat, like go into that like you are? Like you are literally like hanging on to like the bottom of the ship of the show, like a barnacle about to fall off, like trying to get any money that you can from everyone else's creative work. And you're using that at the expense of children. Like, is she supposed to let you do that without trying to stop it or slow it down at least a little bit? Like, what, honestly, what is the reaction she's supposed to have? Just like let you do that to like a 13-year-old?
Yeah,
Well,
and like I get why people are so anxious for Nico, you know, and he's gonna be the first like canonically queer character we get on screen. And that's a huge deal, but he doesn't have to be that for not even like where we're at in the books yet. And he's not going to be a main player in Titan's Curse. He's going to be in like what, maybe 3 episodes total?
if
Maybe.
like he's gonna have a small appearance in probably episode one. I bet episode one is probably gonna end with Annabeth falling off the cliff
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
something to that effect. Or Bianca joining the hunters.
Yeah.
And then I mean he'll be in a little, like a couple of lines maybe. If they
Hmm.
even keep them in, it may not even be important enough for them to keep them in. Of like episode two, but he may be at the end of episode two being like, Percy promise, and Percy's like, I can't promise.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then he'll be in the last episode, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe three. And I mean, my friend Laura, she said the safety of their mentality and physicality of these kids is more important than the outcome of the show. And absolutely. So I would be surprised if they even keep Nico in every single scene that he's intended to be in the books,
Hmm.
especially if it doesn't have an inherent need, because a lot of the time he just sit next to Percy. They can get a body double to do that. I mean, like the yeah. And
They
we're
would they would just have a body double do it. Like when they did season one, they had body doubles doing things for Walker and Leah.
yeah.
And so they would do the same thing with him if he had to be there, like for like the capture the flag stuff. He doesn't necessarily have to, but it is like that scene can happen somewhere else, where Percy realizes that Nico is like little him. That doesn't have to happen during capture the flag just because that's where it happens in the book.
Hmm.
But I also trust this production that they think about all of that stuff and don't want to like overwork this tiny little kid. And especially because he will probably have like 7 months off between between like his first couple episodes. He'll do like a month of episodes and then have like 7 months off and then come back at the very end, like when like for like one day, probably like 1 or 2 days on set to do like the ending scene where everyone cries. And
Yes.
then that'll be the end of it. But yeah, it's just that stuff doesn't matter as much as how these kids actually feel about all of this stuff. And I just wish that they would just kind of let things happen naturally, I guess, instead
Well,
of making it really aggressive.
my one of my friends said that like we're an entire book series away from Nico being a queer character canonically. Like he's queer. He's already queer. His queerness didn't like start in House of Hades, but he's not presenting that way yet. So
Hmm.
there's going to be so much pressure on this like small child who is struggling with their own identity as just a person to be like, oh, I have to represent the queer community when I don't even know who I am yet. That's a lot of pressure for people to put on him, and that's why I'm like, I like if Nico. I don't want to say if Nico was completely removed from the show, I wouldn't care. Like I would care. That's an important part of the storyline, but it's not so integral to the Titans Curse season that Nico needs to be in so much of it.
Hmm.
So I just hope people give him a lot of
Yeah, there
grace.
when it comes to like the I swear to God, the like queer when it's like men and boys or men together, that like fandom is always somehow unhinged, like in every fandom. And like since the beginning of time, it's been this way. And so, I've already seen like Becky have to like defend herself when people get upset when she says like, I don't know if Will is ever going to be in season 5. What do you like? We don't even know if season 5 is going to happen, much less if Will is going to be there. Because if you cast him for that one tiny like 3-second scene in The Last Olympian, then you're basically kind of screwing him being in anything else because of the like the time jumps and stuff like that for his character. So that'd be weird. And people get upset with her about that. And like some of the things I saw on Twitter were people like speculating about them trying to like add that stuff in early. And I'm like, do you know that Trump is president? They are not going to add in like queerness onto this show like 5 seasons early. Especially right now. That would be not a good idea for that child or anyone else involved. Like, let's not put like a bigger target on their back than they already have, considering that their love story is an interracial couple. They already have like literally the entire identity of this entire show is already going there. And so let's not make it worse by like having a child, the youngest like character, be gay, openly gay, like 5 years before it actually happens in the books. Just because you want to see it more on screen, like I don't think that's worth it to put those characters and kids through that experience. Because let's not pretend like there wouldn't be a wild reaction to that, because there would be.
Yeah, well, and we haven't heard too much from Disney about like them getting investigated for not stopping their DEI programs. Like
Yeah.
since we both kind of raised the red flag of this is scary knowing that they're doing Percy Jackson. But one thing that I heard recently was that Disney's opening a new park in a part of India that is very anti-queer. And so it tells me they might not be going in the best direction. And so yeah, like putting too much pressure on making Nico queer too early could be a really bad thing for his character, depending on what's going on with Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
You never know. Disney just does whatever will make them the most money. They're a huge corporation.
Not
That's
true,
what they're going to
actually.
do.
So I found out that they turned down J.K. Rowling for hosting the like Wizarding World
Because
in Disney parks.
she was asking for more money.
Well, not
That's why
that.
they
She
turned her
wanted to
down.
make some of those spaces not accessible. She's like, well, in Hogwarts, everything is like very small, and you don't need to get a wheelchair through. And it's like we have Percy Jackson, where there's literally a kid in a wheelchair in camp in the new series. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was part of it that I heard, that like Disney was trying to be more inclusive than J.K. Rowling wanted, and she wasn't going to make any concessions on what she wanted for the storefronts and stuff.
Of course.
like, I'm of the opinion, and my friend Heidi, who's down commenting right now, but I'm of the opinion that if she would have just shut the fuck up for the rest of her life, that woman could have lived out her whole life chilling. She would have been fine. Like, shut the fuck up Friday is every day, and she should have taken that to heart. She did not. And, like, it's federal law that they have to make it accessible. So the fact that, like, for them it was a risk of, are we going to work with J.K. Rowling and, more Harry Potter? Or are we going to meet federal law standards like we're supposed to so we don't get fined out the ass?
Yeah.
Probably the second one. Excuse my French.
It's always really funny to me that the way that J.K. Rowling really gave it away for the very first time was her accidentally copying and pasting a super transphobic, like gigantically transphobic tweet accidentally in response to like a 6-year-old child's drawing about Harry Potter on Twitter. That was like the way that she outed herself completely accidentally. And she at before that she liked a transphobic tweet, and then but people generally believed her when she said she did it on accident. And then like a couple days later she did that, and people were like, "Oh, this isn't an accident. You're one of these people." And it was just because she literally could not stop herself. Like, How many millions of followers do you have on Twitter and you didn't look to see what you freaking posted on one of your tweets before you just posted it?
Well, I don't know if you've seen that, like now Stephen King is heavily endorsing all of her tweets,
Yeah.
Yikes.
which has been somewhat like, and I keep seeing them like on threads where like Stephen King will repost her on threads and then where somebody is posting a screenshot. And even though it's not that shocking, it's still like he has gone all of this time without a singular endorsement. And then suddenly, under certain circumstances, he's like, my time to shine, my time to show that I am all for this. And the first one was a little sketchy. It was like, is he saying what we think he's saying, or is this satire? And then it kept going, just kind of like J.K. Rowling's, we thought it was an accident, it wasn't an accident.
That's
I've never liked
disappointing.
I've never liked Stephen King because of how he depicts CSA.
I
Yeah.
didn't get to that one. So I read the only Stephen King I've read is Carrie. And I just remember feeling deeply uncomfortable reading the period scene and him having people shout, "Plug it up, plug it up." What woman has ever said plug it up? First of
No
all.
one.
Like like it's very much a man writing women's issues. And so I was just like, okay, whatever. And I think I read his on writing book, which, doesn't have too many of those things from what I remember, but yeah, I got weird vibes from the man a long time ago.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I wanted to bring up with Sky here, since you have your um, collection, is that I wanted to give you a chance to talk about how Becky was talking about people making the books like outrageously expensive on sites and stuff since the TV show aired, and since this is what you do, wanted to give you a chance to talk about if there's been a difference or that whole situation, because it must be really frustrating to watch as the person whose art is being like weirdly made expensive when you don't want it to be.
Yeah, so I have noticed a big difference in prices, but I've held true. Like most of my collection, most of the books on here were like $3 to $7. I've gotten some of them for even pennies. The most I've spent on a singular novel in this entire collection is like maybe $40 or $50. Um, and a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, you're hoarding. You're preventing other people from getting them." I do giveaways all the time. I have given away tons of these books, tons of them. I've just randomly sent like full sets to some of my friends even because I am collecting them, but I'm also preserving a lot of them. So up here, these are all advanced reader copies. I have every single one of these in archival paper. This is like a mint condition US copy, like not even a bent corner. And I had this not in archival paper for like 7 months. And then I finally put it in the archival paper. But that's kind of the other thing. Like right now, Becky is the person who has kind of the she's the SME, the subject matter expert on like all of the signatures and editions and everything. Um, and that knowledge isn't exactly like placed anywhere in a forum. It's not anywhere public. So that's actually what I'm working on is like this historical, this is where this comes from. This is when he did his signings. Um, because I enjoy like the preservation of art, which is what a lot of this is. And the other thing is I refuse to buy anything that isn't licensed. If it was gifted to me, I will absolutely keep it, love it, display it. But I don't buy anything that isn't licensed. So like, are these sets right here? This is Bookish Box. This is a Lumicrate. Those sets are expensive. They're very expensive. But I, one, refuse to buy resale, and two, I bought them upfront initially, and they are licensed. Rick had to give the good old check mark, or his team, whoever, I'm sure Rick had a hand in it, on approving both Limicrate and Bookish Box to distribute his material. So that's kind of the other thing. So many people rebind it, or they're like, oh, I made a new cover, I made this, blah, blah, blah. But it's not licensed material. And while I've noticed that Rick doesn't typically go after people or take down Etsy sellers who are reselling his copyrighted material, I only support people who do have copyright like rights and licensing agreements and everything. So I've noticed a significant price jump since the show was announced and a lot of these books and everything, but I am also willing to take risks on scams. Most of the time, the book that I buy is not the book I end up with. I mean, I just got a new copy of The Titan's Curse today. This is not what I bought at all. I was not even trying to buy The Titan's Curse. So this is the copy that came about, and it's beautiful. It's still very well maintained and everything, but like I take risks on scams and spend $2 to $5 on those scams, and then I end up with these. So I'm not really trying to hoard all of these copies. They do just kind of show up at my house though. But yeah, I think it's ridiculous that people are selling copies like that. I mean, so that advanced reader copy, the original US one for The Lightning Thief, that is listed on Mercari right now for $2,000 with significantly less condition than that. Like, it is disgusting condition. And it is sitting on Mercari right now for $2,000. There are signed editions that just, like, there's a signed edition of the Mark of Athena that sold for $145 the other day. I saw that on there for 3 months. I saw that sitting on Mercari for 3 months. I was not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, because the more that people actually pay those prices, the more that those sellers will continue thinking, I have to price my books at that price. So if there's a full set, I'm not buying it for more than $200. I think $200 is pretty reasonable for 5 hardcover books that are out of print. Mm-hmm. Because they would normally be about $25 to probably almost $30 each this day and age now if they were being sold right now. So yeah, about $200 seems fairly reasonable. Anything more than that, and I'm out. But I also don't buy full sets very often. I just buy pieces and then suddenly end up with full sets.
Yeah, and I don't think there's like a lack of copies out in circulation. I have a couple used bookstores near me. There's a whole Rick Riordan shelf, and tons of copies of things. So, I mean, it's harder to find some of the in-between books. Like, I've been on the hunt for another copy of the Demigod Files because I bought one up and gave it to Shannon for Christmas. But, yeah, like, all of the mainline books are there.
Yeah. I mean, and I go to used bookstores all the time, and I never buy out all of the Percy Jackson copies, but a lot of the copies that I have, so I have, like, even behind all of this is just paperback copies of the, like, original paperback copies. I donate a lot of those to teachers in nearby areas because they're, like, in decent condition, and I know a lot of teachers like to read Percy Jackson with their kids, and some of the kids have auditory issues, so they need to read physically with them. And then I know I was the type of kid, I liked to hold the book in my hands, so a lot of times my teachers would make me read to the class instead of them read to the class. But, like, because that's important to me, and I think it's important to keep these books in circulation because they have so many topics and themes that you can discuss on day in and day out. Like, it never stops. Yeah. So, and I mean, my friend Laura said, I know a lot of people try to argue that rebinding itself is legal. Some rebinds are illegal. If you just put a trident on it, like trident on the cover, or you spray the edges and you put a trident on there, that you can't copyright a trident. But if you put the camp beaded necklace on the cover or on the painted edges. That is copyrighted material because that is specific to the books exclusively. You can't copyright a trident. It is a like, you know, like if somebody has a hockey romance and they paint hockey sticks on the sides and they sell that, they don't need approval or licensing from the author to sell those. But if it's, you know, like a specific symbol, specific quote from the book, that's now copyrighted material. You need licensing and approval from the author for that. So I typically just don't buy any unlicensed material. Like these right here are the Nerdy ink covers. Those are licensed, so I buy those. Just like this sprayed edge right here, Wrath of the Triple Goddess, and then this one over here, Chalice of the Gods. Those are licensed material because they were approved, even though it has like the cover literally painted on the edges.
And honestly, when it comes down to this stuff, like posting the videos that we do on YouTube, I've put in clips from a bunch of different like movies or TV or whatever. I never get like a copyright claim on anything Percy Jackson. And so it's not like the Riordans are out here like hunting people down, but it's more of just like, do you respect them?
Right. So
Like I respect them. I would cry as I fall asleep at night if I thought that I did something that would hurt them somehow or like hurt their copyright. I will give them money. Like I don't want to do that. That's the whole reason why the whole thing of Becky Riordan watching us happened, is because I want to make sure that we didn't do anything that they wouldn't be okay with, because I felt like it was like my responsibility to ask. And so that's mainly where it comes from, at least I think with us, is like we respect them a lot and we want to not do anything that would take anything away from them. Not because they're going to come after us. Like J.K. Rowling goes after Harry Potter people a lot. And like and actually like sends them cease and desist letters and things like that when they do things that are in like her world. And stuff like that. They're not going to do that necessarily because they've never even copyright claimed one of our YouTube videos. I doubt they're suddenly going to jump to something like that out of nowhere. But it is more just a thing of you know what they've put into this book series, so do you want to like engage in it in a way that feels good instead of just like using it because you know that it will get people's attention. And it might be easier to like, if you're trying to sell things, it would be easier to sell it if you use like their copyrighted material instead of like making your own stuff.
So I'm trying to think if we had any other like smaller topics before we get into our big one for today, which is attachment styles.
Um, we all talked about classics, people.
Oh gosh,
If you
yes.
want to go down that road again, I'm not talking about that ever again. I swear to God. Um, I no, they're too mean. I can't handle it.
Yeah,
So,
with me, it's like I'm talking to 20-year-old Mandy because I went to, you know, like I went to school for this. We were encouraged in this. I actually put it on my Instagram, the image that was on the shirt I've been telling you about, Shannon. But our department shirts literally said classics the few the proud. Like they like being the dodo birds and they like that like nobody else knows their shit when it comes to this. Like it gives them a sense of authority that like we're the ones that know how to translate it and nobody else. And it's so stupid. It's so stupid.
Yeah, ugh, I posted a video about Medusa, and then I feel like this is like the best way to describe this kind of like interaction that happens, is that somebody saw that video and sent it to somebody who is someone in school right now, I guess in Oxford, like England, at Oxford University, getting like some sort of degree in classicism, but she said that somebody sent her that video. And so somebody saw me make that video that was just me reading out like the article that came out about Percy Jackson when they had the Medusa episode, that is just Rick and Becky explaining why they depicted Medusa the way that they did. And that's all I'm doing in that video is just reading out their quotes. I'm not even saying what I think. I'm just saying what they think. And somebody saw that and sent it to her, and she like showed up in my comment section basically to tell me that I was wrong. And I'm like, what does it say about this community that you feel proud about the fact that it is your duty and job to show up and tell rape victims, stop talking about Medusa because you're wrong? Like, that's what you do online? It's just, it was like a ridiculous thing that it happened at all in the first place. It was ridiculous that I'm just tired of people thinking that I am being mean when I'm just talking and not apologizing for what I'm saying. I didn't say anything mean in that video. I just told that person, like, why do you assume that the Riordans wouldn't know about the history of Medusa if you know the history of Medusa and this myth? Why do you assume that he doesn't know that it's, like, quote unquote, Roman? Like, of course he knows that. Hello, he wrote an entire book series about this. How could he not know that? But you know that, a random person on the internet. And it's just this overall thing that they don't stop to think about what they're saying before they say it, and just asking, like, could you maybe consider to think about it from another perspective? Like, maybe there's more information that you don't know. I wasn't saying that person is never allowed to talk about anything. I was just saying, like, maybe consider this other way of thinking about these myths, and was just immediately, like, told to stop. And I'm just like, I'm tired of that. I'm tired of people saying that I'm being mean. And just because I'm asking them to, like, not show up in my comment section and tell me to stop talking about rape. And it's like, I don't, okay.
Yeah.
I'll stop talking about it then.
Sorry,
It's okay.
Cleopatra has entered the chat.
Oh my gosh. We love the special guests. It's fine.
I miss
Um,
having cats.
well, so I think the other thing is it takes a level of knowledge to be able to understand the and Alora, she went into classics too. She's one of my friends in the comments. She said, I love classics, but it is still very much a boys' club, and if you don't have a PhD, you don't matter. And like, I think one of the big things about Rick writing this series and writing so many other follow along series is it takes a level of knowledge to be able to warp the source material into a way that is accessible to children the way it is. Because even though we can pick up the different, like as adults, we can pick up the different intricacies, like children aren't going to know, often they're not going to know the parallel of Achilles and Patroclus between Selena and Clarice, but adults will who've engaged a little bit more with mythology, and who have engaged a little bit more with the Iliad and everything. But that's kind of the great thing. I'm sorry,
You're just fine.
she's turned very limp.
I guess that was like the overall thing that was making me upset about how people were. That person that responded to me basically made like a 9.5 minute video insulting Rick's intelligence. That was the thing about it that made me the most upset, was that the entire video was basically saying, well, because he went to school and then became a teacher and didn't spend the rest of his life trying to suck up to people in the scholarly world, it means that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't know anything about these myths, and he can't be trusted, and he's not actually an expert at what he says he is. And it's just like, not everybody wants to sit in a room like reading a book written by somebody in France who's now dead about these stories, and making it very like just myopic and boring. Like the way she talked about, like, oh, he picked the Medusa myth because it was the most popular. And it's like, no, he picked that myth because of the character Percy Jackson. He picked the myth about Medusa being a victim because he was trying to show that Poseidon is a horrible person. And the myth of Medusa, and especially having Medusa feel sympathy for his mother, and feeling like his mother is also like a victim of Poseidon like she was, that's like what he was trying to do. That's why they picked that version of the myth, not just because it's the easiest one. And it's just like this idea of like expecting that he picks the myths that he does just because it's the easiest, so he doesn't have to think about it. And it's like, oh, who do you think people are? Like, do you think that they would like dedicate their entire adult lives to writing this many books? Like, Rick has written like 50, at least 50 books since 2005. He wrote a book a year for 10 years. Like, that's crazy about this stuff. You don't do that unless you have like a never-ending passion for this stuff just to start with, and a lot of knowledge. And he's somebody that just always wants to learn something new. Like during season 1, he took like a class on how to do marine biology just for fun, and now he's teaching himself how to speak Spanish for no reason, just because he likes to. And so that's the kind of person he is. And so I'm like, you have to know like nothing about him, which is weird considering that you're in like the classics world. Because I guess the thing that I wish that people like that would admit is like, how many people are you in school with right now that wouldn't be there if Percy Jackson didn't exist? Because I remember before those books came out, there was hardly any Greek mythology retellings when I was growing up. The first Percy Jackson book came out when I was 20. I didn't read it for another 5 years after that, but there was nothing. Like, I saw the movie Troy, and I was really excited about seeing it because there was nothing Greek mythology related that was made.
Yep.
And that movie is bad. Like,
I mean,
I
it's
was,
bad mythology-wise.
yeah. And so I was so excited about seeing the movie Troy because before that, it was the like Odyssey TV movie that is like embedded into my traumatized brain for some reason from like 1997 that I watched in 6th grade when I was in school. There wasn't that much stuff coming out about it then, and there is way more now. And he's obviously not the only one, but he's a big part of it because higher generations of kids grew up reading those books. And it
Yeah.
made them want to get involved in the world. And it's just like mixed messages that they're like, I'm really excited about these new adaptations to these stories. I want to get to know more. And then somebody immediately is like, bye.
Yeah, it's really, and as Guy was saying in her comments, like somebody saying it's a boys' club, and Shannon's random comment about France, I realized I left that out of my video where that came from, because now I'm like, wait, there's no context for Shannon saying this. So the reason why Shannon keeps saying that is because I looked into the PhD requirements. You need to have French or German, sometimes Spanish and Italian to get your PhD in Latin and Greek. And it's because secondary scholarship is mostly written in those languages. So we're translating stuff from old ass white dudes from the Mediterranean and then reading the scholarship on them from other old ass white dudes being taught classes by old ass white dudes, because I would say 90% of my teachers in classics have been white men, and the ones that weren't white men were white women. So, it's just not a lot of diversity there. And like when we shut down some of these modern interpretations, these modern adaptations, we're also shutting down that diversity. And like, let's not pretend like the Mediterranean wasn't diverse back in the day. Like, it had its own set of diversity as well.
Yeah. And Rick has never claimed to be any kind of expert, but I'm sorry, I have so much cat hair on my face.
It's okay.
I don't know why she went limp in my arms like she did. But he said that like one of the big inspirations for writing the Percy Jackson series or even telling the story the way he did to his son Haley was because there is very little accessibility for mythology to children, especially at the time that he wrote it, because there was Diodolairs. And I read Diodolairs as a kid. My math teacher saw me reading Percy Jackson, and she was like, I think you would like to read this. And I reread the books like over and over and over again. But again, like they're just picture books with a couple of paragraphs here and there, like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And it's still not like child accessible, but Percy Jackson is. And it's gripping and it's enrapturing. And then like if people want to do more research or more looking outside of it, then it's like, yeah, hell yeah, I get to know more. And then it richens the already content material of the Percy Jackson series. And Rick also let like his students and 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds read the early copies of the novels to make sure that children like them, not just an editor, not just someone at Disney or Hyperion or Miramax, like not just a random person who's an adult and is like, yeah, this will probably appeal to children. Like he had beta readers that were literal children who read it. So we have no idea what changes he had to make the story conducive to the child mind. Because I'm sure like the first draft was never the draft that was published. And I mean, even in the advanced reader copy, there's some quotes that are different. There's some lines that are different, paragraphs that are a little switched around here and there. But we don't know what the beat looked like for that. We don't know how much mythology was entwined within that. And the other thing is, his world is not like the average, normal world. It blends both the Greek and the Roman as if they are the same entity but different, which is not the same thing in classics. I mean, Roman mythology, yes, it is Greek reimagined, but not really, because there's so much of it that sits in actual like Roman culture, and like so much of it is about like Romulus and that whole story. Like that isn't a reimagined Greek story. There are Greek roots to some of the stories. There are Greek twists or Roman twists on some of the Greek stories, but in Rick's world, they're essentially the same. They're just like, nope, this was stolen culture, and now it's a little different, but it's at the same time. And so it makes sense. Like in the Lightning Thief, the Medusa story is more akin to the Greek myth, whereas in the show, it's more akin to the Roman myth. And that's because, one, it served the story better, and two, there was an audience that they found was more sensitive to that content. And like creating relatability between multiple people is a huge thing. And there's so much like child sexual assault that children don't even realize that they're being sexually assaulted for many, many years. So having that content in main media that is accessible to children is super important. Like there are more stories to tell, and Rick had the opportunity with the show to explore other myths. And I was earlier today, one of my old Facebook posts popped up when I watched The Hero's Journey. I don't know if you guys watched that on Disney.
Yeah.
And
That's the documentary from after
Yeah.
the season one.
Yeah.
After the season
And
one behind the scenes one.
I had posted in a Percy Jackson group on Facebook, and I was like, guys, I know you're upset about the spiders thing. I know you're upset about this and this change. And I was like, but Walker was really tired, like dead tired. He was talking about how tired he was. And Rick said if they can complete something in one day, then they'll make the changes to put less stress on the children to complete it in one day rather than do it multiple days, just because these kids who are also going to school on set should be more lore accurate. Like the books aren't lore accurate to the myths, and it's okay, like, because mythology is an adaptation as we learn and grow and connect to things. So I think that's important. Like with a lot of classics, yes, we can engage in the classics and we can be like, that is the true myth, but we can also be like, I really connect with this version of it because somebody reimagined it in a way that I have now re-understood certain parts of the myth that connect with me. So I don't understand a lot of that elitism within, I mean, I understand the elitism within the classics world. There's like an archival documentation that is necessary to continue that education and maintain those records, but also nobody is changing the original documents. Somebody is changing the story.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was already fan fiction. Like all Greek mythology is fan fiction.
All
We
of it
just
is fan
decided
fiction.
that this fan fiction is more valid than this other fan fiction.
It's
I
all
think
so
that's the
pedantic.
funniest. That's the funniest thing in the entire world when they're like, "This is fan." You literally have a degree in reading fan fiction. That's fine. Like I could have one of those from how much I've read AO3. But that's what that is. The Bible is also fan fiction, by the way. You can get mad at me, but that's never not going to be true. Like no matter what you say, it's all fan fiction. That's fine. If it's fan fiction, there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have any meaning or belief or there's nothing beautiful or wonderful or amazing about it, or that it shouldn't be protected the way that it is. But it's just Rick Riordan and Becky made this thing that was very much focused on children. And that is the priority for them still when they make the show, like you said, with them not wanting their actors to be exhausted because they recognize that they're actually children.
Yeah.
Even today, Becky was saying that they pick people to work on set that they know can work well with children because they don't want a documentary made about them one day in a bad way. And so they've actually learned things. They're not going to, and like the amount of times that Becky mentions asking the child actors, like, are you sure you're okay? They obviously know how tough this stuff can be, and they want them to be as okay as they can be. And it's a really nice, like, breath of fresh air, honestly, to find some people that have some sort of, like, position of some sort of authority that actually care about children. That never happens. And so I get so frustrated when people don't like them for very extremely pedantic, like, white supremacy centered reasons. Like, the original story has to be the best one because it came first. It was like, says who?
Yeah. So, should we dive into attachment styles yet? um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I had to do research on this, and me and Shannon were talking about this. We were not people that looked up our attachment styles ahead, like more ahead than of this podcast, because we are the type that intellectualize our mental illnesses too much if we look too much up. And so I like always knew I could get attached to people, and I get too attached, and I'm like, oh, I don't have attachment problems because I can get attached, but I'm too attached. I'm anxious attachment. So that's what I figured out looking this up. Is like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then I looked up what causes it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, this is it.
The one thing I wanted to say just as like a precursor before we even get into this discussion, because this is something that greatly bothers me about the internet, is that like can everyone stop acting like these different psychological theories are your new Hogwarts house?
Oh
Because
gosh,
people
yeah.
talk about like attachment styles as like I'm this and you're that, and so this is the only way that we can act. And I'm like, no, 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 no. These are supposed to be things that you use when you're working in conjunction with a licensed therapist, not a life coach off the internet, where you can like help understand the things, the patterns that you get stuck into, so you can help yourself figure out a way to try to work on those over time so you don't do them as much, or just being self-aware of what you do. Being self-aware is like 85% of the battle,
Hmm.
honestly. And so I remember years ago seeing a video about attachment styles, and I was like, oh, I'm the disorganized one because it's both at the same time, and my life is a disaster. So I'm definitely the one that people are afraid of the most because it's like both at the same time, being anxious and avoidant at the same time, just in opposite directions depending on the day. And so yeah, that's me, but that's all I did. Like I've never even brought it up with my therapist, any therapist that I've seen, and I've been in therapy for 7 years because I don't need to. We can talk about the things that I do that maybe are connected to that without specifically talking about it in that way. Because it's one of those things that it's a general overall view of everything, but not everyone can kind of fit in the same little box. And I don't want people to feel like they have to, or if they think they have a certain attachment style, that they're like stuck having that for the rest of their life or something, which isn't true at all either. You can change your attachment style if you work on it enough. But overall, with this book series, Sky had the great idea of talking about this because of us trying to talk about how Percy and Annabeth happen in this book and people not
Oh yeah.
understanding what we're trying to say. Like, literally last night, somebody sent me 8 comments on like somebody else's video where all I said in the video was they were saying stuff about like Annabeth being upset with him in this book because he spent 2 weeks with another girl, which that they're mean Calypso, which is like interesting to say it like that. But the only thing I said in that comment was like, well, imagine how he might feel when she's still defending Luke after all this time. It's like an equal opportunity thing that they both don't understand each other. It's not just like one side. And
Hmm.
that person got so mad at me that they left me like 8 comments in a row. Oh no, this thing is asking me what I'm going to wear on my head again.
Oh no, not the at 1 hour it always gives us these weird puzzles. Mine didn't work last time. It's so weird.
There was like 3 minutes that I cut out of her just staring at the screen like,
Yeah.
That was really funny to fast forward, by the way. When I was fast forwarding that. Okay. Um, but yeah, you talk now, Sky. It's your idea. You talk now.
Oh, um, so I didn't think about attachment style. I'm gonna be so honest. I don't even know what my attachment style is.
Good.
So
Yeah.
I really don't care to know. My therapist just says that I have abandonment issues, so I'm like, that's great. That's probably because everyone abandons me. So yeah.
Uh-huh, that's how that happens.
But not everyone. I actually have a lot of really great friends I've met the last few years, and they're incredible. But still, like, I struggle to form any attachments with them because I'm like, yes, if I talk to them too much, they'll perceive me and then they'll just abandon me. So then I don't talk to them, and then I don't give them a chance to abandon me. So then they do it anyway. Uh, but the uh, like I wanted to discuss how specifically Percy doesn't recognize the types of relationships that he's building. He recognizes that he cares for people. He recognizes that he has like this deep-seated loyalty for people, but he's never been given the opportunity to understand what romantic love is. Like the only love that he's truly experienced is that motherly love from Sally. So that, like, we see, especially in the first book and the third book, that Percy has such strong emotional intelligence, especially when it comes to his mom, because we see him become like just very buttery, very, very open and vulnerable, even when he doesn't want to be around her, because she gives him this safe space, even if initially like she doesn't put him in a safe space and she continues putting him in these other spaces. Like, she's the safe space, but not necessarily the environment that she's put him in, especially with Gabe and other boarding schools and everything that she's had to send him to. But he perceives her as the safe space, and she is his like, okay, this is it. This is safe. This is care. This is love. This is what I understand to be love and care and everything. And I think that's why when he visits Calypso's island, that he struggles to leave. It's not because he's like, I love Calypso, or when like people are like, yeah, he was falling for Calypso. I think he was just like, oh, like I'm being like cared for in the same way my mom cares for me. Somebody is clothing me and feeding me and like helping my wounds and taking care of me afterwards. And it's somebody who wasn't actively there in battle with him, like it is with Annabeth almost all the time. Somebody who wasn't actively there with him. So I think he really struggles to understand what romantic love is truly perceived as. Like, he feels a crush and he's like, okay, yeah, I don't have time for that. I'm in survival mode. Time, like romantic, that when I'm about to die, that's the last thing on my mind. And so I think Percy has kind of that avoidant attachment style. He may be a little closer on the disorganized just because he has that such strong sense of loyalty for all of the people around him, but he also very much is super avoidant and disconnected as soon as those people are no longer able to be in his life. But he feels so much deep-seated betrayal. And then Annabeth is definitely like the anxious attachment style kind of person, because she, like, even with Luke, she's told in this book, flip it around, she's told in this book that she's going to lose someone she loves to something worse than death. She already knows about the great prophecy at this point. And she tells Percy in the second book, like, oh, yeah, you're going to die. Like, she knows that, one, she loves very few people. She already loves very few people. If we take stock of her loved ones, it's going to be Chiron, who's immortal. It's going to be Percy, Luke, Thalia, who is now a hunter, so odds of losing her to something worse than death, very low. And then her dad, who she has a really just like wonky relationship with at this point in time. So she is like, I can't get too close to Percy because if I do, I'm gonna love him too much. I'm gonna fall more in love with him. And then she's like, shit, I gotta do something about it. And she does. And then she expects Percy to be a little more like gung ho about it. But Percy is like, oh, we just have to survive. I was that kid that was reading it. Like Walker was like, yeah, I was reading it and I just thought it was like a friend to kiss. And I'm like, dude, I read the kiss and I was like, oh, that's cool. And now we're moving on because Percy gets blown up. You know, I'm like,
Hmm.
I didn't recognize throughout the entire series that Percy and Annabeth were inching towards coupledom. Like, that didn't make sense to me. And I think Percy didn't realize that because he had never seen his mother have a model of good love until Paul Blofeld showed up and entered the picture, right? So when Paul enters the picture, that's when Percy starts seeing like a genuine connection between two human beings that is modeled to him. And he's like, oh, like maybe eventually, oh, hold on.
It's making you do the puzzle thing too. It hasn't done me yet, so.
Why does it keep wanting me to put a frog head on my head? I don't know, but it does. Every single
Okay,
time. A
tropical
frog
fruit,
hat.
tropical fruit. But it wanted me to say which ones were tropical fruit, and now it gave me some pineapples.
Okay.
Um, but after Percy gets that like kind of model of what like a good healthy romantic love is like, that's when he now has these two girls who are like, I like you too, and he's like, what do I do, like, because it's his first time being able to open up and like kind of, I don't want to say experiment, but like experiment those emotions in general.
Hmm. It's
um
literally like an experiment of like, do I have feelings? Like, what are these feelings? Do I get them? Or is this just stuff for other people?
yeah.
It's like that kind of feeling of like, I said I think that Percy would be more on the disorganized side, like we would overall be because we're that person. But also, like, even the end of Battle of the Labyrinth, when he's having the very end, when he's having his birthday party, he's thinking about how he wishes that Rachel was there, that he would have invited her, but he was scared to do it. And it's like that kind of a thing of Rachel is this nice girl who isn't directly involved in any of this stuff that's happening. So it's nice to be around her. She likes me. She doesn't have any weird attachment to Luke or anything like that. So that's always a plus. But he's like afraid to almost bring her around him more, almost like afraid of what would happen if he did. Like what he would do, what she would do, if he would somehow ruin it. Something like stopped him from inviting somebody that he actually wants to spend time with on his birthday because he just is almost like too afraid to see what would happen if he did that. And it's like that's like the best way to describe that sort of attachment style of like, I've said this to Mandy before, like I've known exactly what I've wanted my entire life, but I don't think I'm ever going to get it. And so I don't like, she'll sometimes think about like the what would I hear, like what would I hear if I was around the sirens, like what would the sirens show me. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what the sirens would show me. I've known that since I was like a little kid, but I just don't think that it's possible for me to get it, so I don't spend any time actually thinking about it or trying to get it because I don't think that I could. And that's the best way to describe that sort of attachment style. And like the other kinds, like the if you're more on the anxious side or the avoidance side, I think you almost are still trying to figure that out. Like
Mm.
you don't know what you want yet, and so you're trying to like almost like experiment to figure out what it is you really do want. Like Annabeth in Battle of the Labyrinth is all over the place. She has no idea what she's really doing. And that's normal for like a teenage girl, especially one that's in the middle of this sort of very traumatic and stressful environment like she is, to be all over the place like that. You're supposed to be like that when you're a teenager. Like she's honestly the closest one in this overall story that's acting like what a normal teenager would act like. And that's normal for people during those years for you to figure out like what you really want and what kind of relationship would really make you happy. And why isn't this person immediately realizing what I want the moment that I've decided that I want it? What do you mean you like have to figure it out on your own now? But you're supposed to be in there with me while I figure this out. I don't want to have to wait for you now. And it's like that kind of stuff is a very normal thing that I've seen at least other people I know talk about when it comes to like romantic things. Um, and it's kind of like a nice reminder when the main character of the story, whose head you're in the entire time for the first 5 books, does not think about that stuff like that at all. He just he just doesn't. He just doesn't think about, like when I read these books, I said this when we read Titan's Curse, that until that scene with with Aphrodite and Ares in the car where they were like Rick hits you with like an anvil about them being romantic. I remember after that scene I like just stared at the book and I was like, what? Like I did not nope, did not consider that at all. I thought they were just friends. And even when they kissed in Battle Labyrinth, I was like, why did she do that?
Me
Like,
too. Me too.
woo!
Yeah.
And so whenever Walker was like saying that, I was like, oh, thank God. This like literal child, like somebody else in the world who reacted to this the same way as me, because everyone else seemed to know the whole time they were reading these books from the time they. I remember like years and years later seeing people being talking about the tunnel of love scene, and I remember stopping and looking at my phone like, was that scene supposed to mean something? Like I.
I did get it, but I will say my first read through, and I remember this vividly, not so much of Battle of the Labyrinth now that I just finished rereading that, but I remember wanting Rachel and Percy to end up together because Annabeth was just like she was just so much that I was like, you know what? I kind of want them to end up together now. I know they're not supposed to, but like, what if he just ended up with Rachel? um, but
Right.
I can have a lot more empathy of Annabeth now, especially knowing how much Luke was playing with her mind that we didn't see in this book. Um, that like is kind of an off-screen thing because it makes so much sense. She's had this guy who's been like an older brother slash crush figure her entire life that she's so attached to. She doesn't want to let him go, even though he is literally putting their evil grandfather in his body. And like I get her a little bit more, even if part of me also is still frustrated with how she's acting because she's a teenage girl.
Yeah. I feel like the best example of like the more, I don't know, super traumatized attachment attachment that we do is that when I read the books, I was convinced that Annabeth was the mole. Like in the beginning of The Last Olympian, I did not want Percy to tell her what the plans were because I was convinced that she was going to tell Luke. And then there's like the scene where you find out that it's Selena, and I immediately was like, well, they can get together now then. And I'm like, it's literally switches that fast sometimes. Where you just like drop your conspiracy theories and you're like, oh, I was wrong. Anyway, this person is fine. I can probably relax now. It's wild being in our brains like that because you're constantly going back and forth like that. Of like, do I trust this person? Yes, I do. No, I don't. Yes, I do. No, no, I don't. Like I've told Manny this before, but like the first 6 months we did this podcast, I was convinced that at some point she would not want to do it with me anymore, and she would want to do it with somebody else. I was like waiting for her to do that, and she never did that. But that's just how this stuff is in your brain, and so that's how Percy is too with Annabeth in general, because I don't know how else he could ever get that idea, considering his lack of attachment in childhood.
Yeah.
Um, Even though his mom loves him, obviously, Sally's the best, she also wasn't around all the time
Hmm.
and was like sending him away a lot. And so, no, it's one of those things. I honestly think the Sally and Percy story is a great way to show like how you can kind of traumatize your kid even if you don't want to or don't you
Mhm.
just don't want to do that. You can still do that. Um, she didn't want to do that, but it still happened. Like she had to send him away, but from his perspective, it was like my mom loves me, but she keeps making me leave. And especially the scene that kills me in the show in the second episode when he's like praying to Sally and he's talking about how like he used to call her crying when he would go to like schools because he hated everyone who was there and would want to go back home. And he was saying like, "Oh, I don't have to do this time because people here seem to like me." And like, let's ignore the fact that he's talking about Luke in that scene, but like overall, it's just that general idea that that's something that would happen. That he would call his mom crying, begging for her to like bring him home, and she would have to say no. And it's like from like a child's perspective, it's like you love me, but you also don't want me around. And that's just, yeah, that's just hard.
Or well, even
It's
more complicated is he's thinking you love me, but I'm too dangerous to be around you.
yeah.
Well, especially in the show when she keeps sending him away, and then he's like, "There's something wrong with my brain," and
Hmm.
he's like, "What if there's more wrong with me than what I know?" And my mom keeps sending me away because I'm a danger to her, and but he doesn't understand that. And when I watch the show, oh my god, there's videos of me bawling my eyes out. I was like,
Yeah.
"I love you."
I like, after I watched the first season in like one day. Literally, the day that the last episode aired, I watched the entire season because I could finally watch the entire thing all in one. Because I was so afraid that I wouldn't like it, even though I thought that I would. That I like didn't. I purposely watched like the trailers and nothing else. Didn't see anything that anyone said because I just wanted to watch it all before like having everyone's like anxieties basically like bouncing around my brain first. But like I would, for like the couple months after that, especially because I was unemployed, I just rewatched it all the time. But I've watched the first episode like one other time because of mainly because of Gabe existing, but it's mainly because of that scene that I'm like I cannot handle watching this scene. Like I see videos of it sometimes and I've had to rewatch it to like use it in videos that we've made, but I'm like this scene gives me so much pain because that's one of those scenes I think about when people are critiquing the show and saying that like because they didn't make Gabe like explicitly abusive, I guess, that that was somehow missing from Percy's character. And I was like, did you miss the scene where he yells at his mom because he's convinced that he's hallucinating and that he thinks that his mom is just telling him that he's actually the child of a Greek god so to support him somehow still? Like that's what he thinks that Sally is doing in that scene. He thinks that his mom thinks that he's crazy, but so she's making up a equally crazy backstory for him so he doesn't have to feel like he's losing his mind. Like he is convinced that he has been hallucinating since he was a small child. And I'm like, does that not get like the idea across of how this stuff that he was going through a lot of trauma as a child, that he was carrying that around, like keeping that from his mom and from everyone else, like lying to like during like the voiceover of the first episode, Percy outwardly says that he lies to like teachers at school, that he lies to the guidance counselor and the school psychologist and tells them that he's not seeing anything when he still is because he doesn't want to be like taken away from his mom. And so it's like in the first 3 minutes of the show, it's him lying to people because he and hiding something about himself because he thinks that he's dangerous and he's afraid of what people will do if they find out what's really going on with him. And it's like, what do you think happens when you grow up like that? Do you think you just like grow up and then they become a teenager and immediately just like trust people and are like ready to just like think that you have like value? Because that's not how it works.
I think that's kind of what drove me nuts about reading The Lightning Thief, and then them being like, he knows too. I'm sorry, but my cats. my my husband came home, and the cats think that they can swindle him out of more food. So they're meowing at him right now in front of me. I'm watching all of this happen. They're meowing at him right in front of me, begging for food because they think they can swindle him out of it, even though I'm 10 feet away from them. I fed them earlier, right before I got on. But damn, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, in the Lightning Thief, when they're like, "Oh, you know too much for the orientation video," and I'm like, "Show the man the orientation video. He doesn't know too much. What the hell?" And I'm like, "What is this for character development?" Because they showed Nico. They showed Nico the orientation video, and Nico saw weird crap and spent 70 years in the Lotus Hotel. I'm like, come on now, show the man the orientation video, because I wanted to see it mostly. I hope.
Yeah.
I hope they do like just like a bonus at the end of, creating all of this, of the orientation video after they announce Apollo for season 3. I think that would
Oh
be
my
super
God.
cool.
That
Um,
would be Apollo
yeah.
doing anything like that. Please let there be like extra scenes of Apollo just doing
Anything.
stuff.
Yeah. I think it'd be
Especially like
cool.
I for when I was going through a really, really, really hard time in my life, I just stopped reading because I couldn't do it anymore. I like didn't sleep enough in order to like be able to think that much. And but one of the last books that I tried to read was Trials of Apollo. Like the very first Trials of Apollo book, and I read like the first third of the book and could not stop laughing. Because Apollo is so funny. I like stopped reading it right when Percy like helps them get to camp and he's like, "Go away. Bye. I'm leaving now. You can't make me join this quest." And it, oh my God. I just want some that sort of perspective of like, how dare you say this about me? And that whole situation to somehow be on screen. But yeah, this is why I always appreciate Percy Jackson as like a
She
entity,
didn't do anything.
is that it's like something that takes the trauma of the kids seriously, like the characters. And so Percy isn't somebody that would understand this kind of stuff. Like Grover is the first friend even that he had that was his friend for an entire year.
And he tried to abandon him the moment he thought Grover was talking crap. He was like, all
Yeah.
right, I gotta go because Grover is not
Yeah.
catching my vibe.
Yeah, and so when you're
He's like,
when you got
Grover's
like
not a real friend, so obviously now I have to go because I'm just opening myself up to hurt, and he's being a weirdo, and he's telling me I'm gonna die, and now, like, I gotta go.
like I'm gonna get off this bus and I'm gonna leave and never come back because he might be crazy too. But it is like a when you have that sort of I don't know, that sort of trauma in your life, you just are like always expecting people to leave, and so you're like genuinely surprised when they don't. Like it's honestly a confusing thing when they don't. You're like sitting there like, but why would you not leave when you can? I'm letting you. I'm giving you permission. And so with you see that with Percy with how he just genuinely doesn't think about how people like see him in like a positive way. It just doesn't occur to him that people would for the people that do. And so when people don't, he's frustrated by it, but it also is like kind of it's almost like expected. Like one of the scenes we talked about the end of Battle of the Labyrinth when Dionysus is being nice to him and he is so freaked out by Dionysus being nice to him, and I'm like, do you know how bad things have to be that Dionysus is giving Percy a pep talk because he's worried about how he's doing? That Dionysus of all people is like, everything is gonna be okay, I swear. Because like he knows like, okay, things are probably they're gonna definitely gonna get a lot worse after this moment too, and that they're already pretty bad. But he generally doesn't even understand that Dionysus or Poseidon at the end of that book are like showing up just to check on him because it doesn't occur to him that people would do that. Or even like when Paul is like being the best person alive and is asking him how he's doing but not making him tell him anything that he doesn't want to that he's not ready to say, and asking if he can marry Sally and stuff. He's like, oh, this reminds me of when I talk I talked to Chiron, and I'm like, oh, it's almost like a feeling that resembles love. But like you don't know what that feeling is. And
Yeah.
I think that's fine because I still am not really sure what that feeling is. I know that I feel it, but I honestly don't know what it is most of the time either. And I'm not sure why anybody would feel that way about me, so that's confusing. But it's just that overall thing of, especially the role that he has in this world is that he's literally useful so that he can die one day. That's in his head from the time that he's like 13,
Well,
at least.
he goes from spending his whole childhood never staying in the same school. Percy went to less schools than I did. Saying something. I went to 12 schools, and
Jeez.
I went to some of those schools. So I went to 12 separate schools, and I went to some of those schools upwards to 4 separate times. So I moved in the middle of every school year and every summer, and sometimes I moved a little more often than that. And like I moved 47 times before I turned 18. So when I was reading like Percy Jackson, I was like, oh my god, it's me! Like, except I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a troublemaker. My mom was just on drugs, but I was like, it's me, and I felt so connected, and I was like, yes. But here's the thing: Percy he's like, well, I never stay anywhere. The only constant is my mom, and she doesn't even want me around all the time. And then she sends him away again, and he goes to camp, and he's like, well, my mom died, so she's gone. And what does he decide to do? I'm 12 years old. I'm going to go to the underworld, and I'm going to take her back from the underworld because that is the only consistent person in his whole life. And she's not even extremely consistent because of a lot of different circumstances. And when it so he gets thrust into this camp where he's told, you are not alone. Everybody else here is like you. But here's the kicker. You are alone because you're a
Mm-hmm.
kid of Poseidon. And not only that, but every kid here is probably not going to live past the age of 18. And then it's like, okay, dang. Well, I guess that was just my cards dealt in life. And then comes Steve Monsters, and he's told, yeah, you're destined to die because of this great prophecy. And if you don't take the mantle to die, then somebody else has to. And then in Titan's Curse, he meets the child who would have to take over the prophecy after him if Percy doesn't die. So then he's like, well, I guess I have to live out of spite to make sure that this kid doesn't have to become the child of the prophecy and die so that he can live. So now I have to die. So instead of being suicidal Percy, which he obviously is, he has to be suicidal but live until I die at the right time Percy. So he goes from the instability of not having um, anyone to attach to, like, because that's what we naturally want to do as children. I never learned to attach to people. I genuinely forget that they exist because my mom was not around. And when she was around, she wasn't really like around. She was more worried about like other men in our life than she was me. So if she could drop me off anywhere, so that she could just be with some random man, she absolutely would. And my father wasn't around since I was 4 years old. So I didn't get attached to anyone. I didn't get attached to friends because I didn't even get attached to teachers at school, let alone my peers. I didn't get attached to anything except for reading books. And the first thing that really got me where I could like read over and over and over again was the Percy Jackson series.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird the way the series keeps intertwining itself into my life.
I know it does that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I will say, like, my life was different, slightly different circumstances, but similar enough. Where, like, the best way I can describe, like, a lack of attachment was when I was in first grade, I tried to run away from home. Um, my school was in the country, and my teacher lived on, like, a sheep farm. And they were doing, like, a field trip where we went to her house to see her sheep. And I can remember standing outside my school. My dad's parents were there to like pick me up to drive me to my teacher's house where my parents were gonna like meet me and stuff for the field trip. And I got on a school bus and just left. And I had no idea where the school bus was going. I did not care. I didn't care where it was going. The school bus driver realized that I was like lost, and I just told them later that I just like accidentally got on the wrong bus. I finally admitted to my mom like last year, like, no, I got on the wrong bus on purpose. And I'm like, I don't even remember why I did that, but it was like the only moment that I could see where I could try to get away. And so I didn't even know where I was going, but I was 7, and I was like, I just need to get away from these people and for like at least an hour of my life. And so when you're running away from home or like liking the idea of doing that, like literally making decisions so you can get away from your family, there's something wrong going on, and you don't, even if I have attachment, the attachments that I had were just hurting me. That's like the way that that happened with me, and that feels very similar when I read the Percy Jackson series, that Percy has a mom that loves him, but he's keeping all these secrets from her. Like, he has a mom that he loves, but he's not telling her how bad things are at school all the time. He's not telling her all the things that he's seen. He's not telling her about Gabe. And so it's like, even around the people that he does have attachment with, like her, he's keeping all of these things away from them because he feels like if he tells them the truth that they won't love him anymore or something. And so it's like, even when you do have attachment, it's still really painful. It doesn't feel good. It's not like what actual attachment is supposed to be like. I still am not 100% sure what that even is. A lot of the time, honestly, like what that sort of thing is supposed to be. I understand a little bit better now, but I'm 40 and it's taken me 7 years in therapy to even get close to figuring that out. It's still very confusing to me to think about it because that's just always been like what that kind of stuff is there's always been some sort of pain involved. Like my dad was just straight up pain. I was like hiding a lot of stuff from my mom. I was hiding stuff from my mom that my sister did to me at a certain age. I was hiding stuff from my sister. I was hiding stuff from everybody. And so I was just carrying all this stuff. And so even though I had these people in my life, including all of my friends and all of my teachers and every guidance counselor at school, every person in the nurse's office, I was like hiding all this stuff from all these people. And some of them could tell that something was wrong. But I just absolutely refused to tell them anything. They would try to tell me or try to ask me questions sometimes, and I would just walk away from them because I was just like, nope, you're going to betray me somehow. Goodbye. I'm not even going to go there. And so it's like that, when you have that sort of thought, like the idea that somebody would want to be around you because they just like you, it just like doesn't enter your mind. Like when we read Battle of the Labyrinth, like Mandy pointed out, that the way that Percy looks at that kiss is that it was a good luck kiss. And that's his way of like rationalizing it, of like, Annabeth could never actually have those sort of feelings for me. That is not humanly possible that she could have those feelings for me. And so she must have just done that because she knew that I was about to die and was just hoping that I would be okay. Not because of anything to do with him. It just doesn't, that's just not something that he considers. Even like the stuff with Nico in that book brings me great pain reading when Nico is yelling at him because he's not fighting it. Nico is like, it's your fault that my sister died. And he's like, yep, it's my fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The end.
So, like, Percy's rationalization of the kiss stems not from insecurity, like natural teenage insecurity, where it's like, oh, she couldn't possibly think that's me. Like, oh my God, like, I'm flattered. It was just like oh, of course, yeah, it's not me because, like, it doesn't make sense kind of deal. And, like, you see so much of that happen in a lot of children who have severely traumatized childhoods. They either go for, like, the enmeshment or they go for, like, the hypo-attachment where, like, completely gone. So, like, me and you, Shannon, we didn't learn how to really form those continual attachments because so I never learned to truly form them, but while you formed them, they were hurtful attachments. They were like, it's part of our natural mechanism to survive, to need people. That, like, we have to attach to learn survival skills. And normally, if you don't attach to somebody in your home like you're supposed to, then you attach to a teacher at school, you attach to a friend, you attach to a friend's mom. You normally attach to a person, and I never attached to a person. So now I struggle, like, in my relationship with my husband. I'm like, oh shit, he still exists. Let me, like, let me remember to give him, like, attention and love like humans deserve. And, like, I will be very, like, attention and love and, like, touch starved for him, like, and I don't even realize it. And then he gives me a hug and then I burst into tears and I'm like, oh, I needed, like, a person for a moment. That makes more sense. And
yeah, the whole touch thing is really weird, like, because it's very, like, it's like like I said, the back and forth thing. Like, yeah, I always want that stuff, but if somebody does touch me, I'm also terrified at the same time. And so it's like, I want that, but the closest I get with that is with my 2-year-old niece, who thinks that I'm the best person on the planet. Like, oh my God. But that's just adorable. But I'll sit there and do that kind of stuff with her, and she will come and, like, sit on me all the time because I just naturally want to give her, like, comfort and stuff. And so for her, it's fine. Like, she could scream in my ear and I don't get like overstimulated like I would with like anybody else because I love her, and that attachment's just easy because she was born and she's adorable. The end. There's none of that like hurt or anything like that that could possibly happen. She could never do anything that could possibly make me feel that way, no matter what she does in life. That will never happen. And so that's like the first person, really like family related, especially that's ever happened with. And I'm like, huh, is this how everyone feels all the time? Because this must be really nice.
Right? Yeah. And so, Mandy, you have more of like the enmeshment, like
Yeah.
almost like too much attachment to the point where you don't understand how to remove yourself as an independent human, right?
Yeah, well, and I like speaking to Shannon saying your attachment style can change. I definitely err on the side of caution now of like I don't know if people are gonna like me if I'm gonna be too much. Might as well make myself smaller. And I am trying to actively undo that. But I am the type of person that like I said this on one of my videos once where it's like it's going to be a very big deal if I ever hard launch a best friend. And it's because I have these best friendships that will go super intense, super fast, and then like we trigger each other because we're both traumatized individuals and then we fight. Like the reason me and Shannon have been able to keep this up as long as we have is because we can just like not go on Instagram for a little while when we're triggered and be like, "Hi, I was massively triggered."
I think the thing of why it works is that the first couple of years when we were figuring out, like, how do I be a friend without destroying this thing? It took us a couple of years of figuring that out, and because we live across the country from each other, that made, like, the distance in that way made it easier to do that, to, like, realize, like, oh, I don't want to do the patterns that I do with literally everyone else that I've ever met in the history of my life.
Yeah.
And because we're not in the same place, I can, like, stop myself from doing it in a way that I just like couldn't, even with other friends online. I just like couldn't do it the same way for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Now it's more a thing that's hilarious that like we'll go from talking about random stuff to talking about whatever, and then one of us is like crying
Yeah.
on like our voice notes or something about something or whatever, and it's just like normal. We're not like phased by it at all. Like there is a couple weeks ago where Mandy sent me a bunch of voice notes crying about something, and then the next day was me sending her a bunch of voice notes crying about something, and I was like, is this just like a bad week overall, or like what,
Yeah.
why is this happening on back to back days? But it is that kind of thing that like I feel like the best example of how this attachment stuff can go is um in 2020 I just like told myself that I wouldn't be friends with anybody in a serious way
Mhm.
until I knew that I could like actually be like an actual friend to them and not do something accidentally that hurt them, and be I've always been somewhat self-aware of all of the things that I can't do. And so it became like unbearable to me, like the idea that I would keep doing that. And so I just like stopped talking to people until I was friends with her. And it took like a year after we became friends for us to really become friends. So it was like almost like 2 years where I barely talked to anybody at all.
Mhm.
Because I didn't know how else to fix that, but to do something like that, that's a very extreme way of doing it. And I
Yeah.
think for her, it's like the opposite of almost being worried about bringing like attention to yourself in some way. I feel like it's a lot of like the same worries, but they come from like very different places. Like I'm
Mhm.
worried that if I bring attention to myself, people are going to realize what a horrible person I am, and I'm not going to be able to like pretend like I'm a good person. For you, you feel like if I bring attention to myself, I'm going to somehow take everything over and make it about me when I don't mean to.
Yeah, and part of that's the golden child. Part of it was growing up enmeshed with your mom, with my mom, because like when your mom is your best friend, this is the way that I described it back in 2021 with my content. When you start out with your mom as your example of your friend, your mom loves you unconditionally. You know, like she's going to not care if you throw a tantrum 1 minute and then you're completely fine the next minute. So I could yell at her and say the meanest shit possible. But if I took that type of reaction to something to a friend, suddenly they don't want to be friends anymore. What? Like that was really hard for me to learn. It took a really long time for me to learn that. And I would say like I've gone through abandonment from other people, you know, like a good example with me of like high school, I had a found friend group, and I had a found friend group because there was like conflict with my family, my extended family that I was super close with when I was very younger. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I got to create a new family. So I had this found family. And then there was infighting in the found family, and I felt the need to pick a side. And so it's like, oh, I'm going to defend this person in the breakup. They won me in the divorce. And it's always been riding hard for people to the extent where the person in that example, like he broke up and it ruined our whole friendship group. He thought I had a crush on him for years because I was that attached to him. And it's like, no, I'm just attached to you. You're a safe person for me. There's no feelings involved in this at all other than I like you as a person. And so I have had people misread that with me. It's like, oh, I'll ride super hard for you. Like, I mean, my example of doing that with Shannon is, you know, people yell at her about Medusa, and I spend a whole week researching Ovid and Augustus, and like, like I'm going to come in with receipts for my best friend. But yeah, like for me, the attachments, it's both like a great pleasure and a great pain. Like I I have my husband now, and he still has to convince me sometimes he's not going anywhere after, God, we've been together almost 16 years. And it's like he still has to tell me, like, you're wrong. I still haven't gone anywhere. Like, I'm here. I'm right here. And it's, I don't know, like it's one thing that it's always there, but I don't know. I freak out that people are gonna leave. And I I can see some of that happening with Annabeth and Luke to some extent because she had the conflict with her parents, with her dad and her stepmom. And then she did find her own found family. And then Talia gets taken away immediately. Yes. And so, you know, this pseudo brother crush person now is her only family. And so she's like literally clinging on to that this entire book series.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Freya has made her debut.
Oh my God.
Hi,
This is
baby.
the last cat.
You cutest little baby.
My cats have all love them. But yeah, you see a lot of like Annabeth's. I think that's why she has that like anxious attachment style, because it's like I attach and then they're taken away. But I have to attach because as a very young child, she was yearning to be part of just this like family. Like she so badly wanted to be part of them and never truly felt like she was there.
Yeah, like, one thing with Annabeth I really like with her dad is how her dad is not like a stereotypical like abusive person you might imagine, like maybe me and Sky's parents or whatever.
Mhm.
Where like her dad does like he has money, he's rich. And so he like can give her all of the like kind of needs like food and clothes and things like that that my parents definitely struggled to get for me still too growing up and things like that. But none of that like means that she actually feels like emotionally connected to him. And so like even when he shows up for her at the end of Titan's Curse, it's still like this kind of big like dramatic show moment, but she's like honestly confused about the fact that he's even there because she never thought that he would do that. But it is kind of like a thing of, you know, you could be there for your daughter all the time and not that just this super dramatic moment when like her life is in danger and you finally can like jump in and be the hero. You could just talk to her,
Yeah.
like have a like the fact that when they show up at her dad's house that Percy is expecting her stepmother to look like a monster because that's the like internal like picture he has in his mind because of how Annabeth described her and what it was like growing up there. Like that gives you every indication of what she went through leave. Like I mean she ran away from home when I did when she was 7. Like you don't do that unless you're like completely fed up with everybody around you and you just like want to get away from them. And except that like the fact that her dad never went after her.
Yeah, that's
I'm just like,
crazy.
I will never like you. I know that some people like him, but I'm glad that things get to a more healthy place with them as the years go on. But I'm always gonna look at him like
You let
you
your
should,
7-year-old live on the streets, you
yeah.
bastard.
This
And
is
it's and
hot.
even like the other years, like you know, she at the end of Battle of the Labyrinth, she's talking about going back to living with her dad, and she's like almost doing it like she's punishing herself or something by like going back to living with her dad, and she's talking about how she's gonna have to go to private school, but she's gonna hate it. And when I read that, that came off as like her just trying to run away from everybody when she realized how wrong she was about Luke and didn't know how else to handle it, but should just like run off for a year and figure out how to deal with all of this stuff. But it's not like she's like really looking forward to it. Like she's just almost like, yeah, I'm gonna go back and have to go to this horrible school that I'm gonna hate because my dad's rich and he'll make me go to a private school that definitely doesn't like disabled kids. No private school does. And so it's just she even when she's things are okay with him, it still kind of feels like she's like almost like trying to fit in, but never knows that she never completely will. Um, and I
I
always see that as like a different thing with her and Percy. That Percy grows up never having a place like camp. And so like Annabeth has camp for many years, like kids that understand what it was like for her to grow up with these things going on. But she doesn't feel that connection to her parent in the way that Percy feels a connection to his parent.
Mhm.
And so they have almost like opposite things, which is why they react to everything differently.
well, so I loved seeing like the way Annabeth and her father started to come back together, but genuinely, hot take, I really had wished that Fred would die.
That'd be fine.
It's not because I wanted him dead, but it's because it's not because I think it would have served Annabeth's purpose and story better or anything like that. Like I don't want him to die for her character development, but I think it would have kind of given her the closure that she needed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it, and I'm not going to get much into this because it moves into Mark of Athena where she has like the issue with her mom later on. But
Mm-hmm.
I like he was never a person to lean on, and then he was also never a person that she could feel truly feel like cut off from. So I was like, I wish this man would just die and stop leaving her in this perpetual like maybe, maybe not, maybe I'm here, maybe I'm there. Like that would have been some kind of closure. It was like the same, like every person in her life kind of lives in that same perpetuality. Luke does, because it's like maybe he'll come back, maybe he won't. She lives in that
Mm-hmm.
hope, and then maybe like after the Kronos thing, she's like, oh, he's far gone, and then she still lives in that teeny tiny bit of hope that Luke will come back because she sees bits of him after granddaddy Kronos takes over his body. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
then
even
like Percy is in that perpetuality for her. Like everything is. And the only constant is Chiron, who is objectively a terrible camp mentor. So it's she just like lives in this very perpetual state. And I was like, I just want this man to fucking die and give her peace.
yeah, it's even like that with Athena, especially Athena. Like Athena, she's always trying to somehow do something that is like enough for her.
Mhm.
And there's never anything that is enough for her. There's nothing that she can ever do that will somehow be enough to make Athena be proud of her the way that she would want her to be. It just isn't. Like, she just is always trying to do that, and so it sucks that she's trying to do that with her dad, too. And you just wish that she could get a break somewhere in there between both of them. And I don't know, I always feel so weird about the thing with her dad is always the fact that he never completely stops choosing um, the stepmom and his kids, his like quote unquote normal kids. over her. That just like even when things are better with them, that still is happening. Because he just knows that she doesn't want to really like living there. He knows that she doesn't like going to these schools. She just, but he just isn't willing to like actually change anything about his life or anything like that to try to help her.
Right.
And it's weird now that say, like, I talk about, like, my niece or whatever. Like, if my niece was, like, a teenager and was like, I need help, I need you to move across the country, I'd be like, okay, I'll go tomorrow. Or,
Yeah.
like, I've told Mandy, like, if she's called me tomorrow and said that she needed me because something happened, I would leave. I would, like, ask my mom to help me with money and I would just leave and go. Because that's what it's like when you have, like, a good, like, attachment with somebody that's based on something that's, like, healthy. It's not because you're like needing to go to like prove something to them, but it's because this person needs me and I know that this is where I should be and I want to help support them. And their needs take priority over that because they need me right now. And so it's like it never occurred to like her dad, like maybe I should move to New York. Like you have a bunch of money, you work at a college, you could probably find a college in New York area that there's a lot of them that you could work at. But it doesn't occur to him that he could do that because he just is like, well, this is where my life is here, so why would I leave?
Yeah.
My wife doesn't want me to leave. My kids wouldn't want me to leave. And it's like, you should leave because it's what your daughter needs. And she shouldn't have to ask you to do that. You should just
Do
know
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so this is another Annabeth crossover. I have a workaholic dad. And my workaholic dad also probably wouldn't move across the country for me. I would still keep carrying on with his work stuff. And so, in some respects, like, I can appreciate he is a man who is probably neurodivergent and is extremely passionate about what he does. But on another respect, it really is like, you were supposed to be my example of like what a healthy attachment with a man looks like. And I didn't have that, not just because of him. We could get into the parental alienation with my mom, but even now, like I will sit there and try to have a conversation with him emotionally. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was like, "Hey, I want to acknowledge that my mom, she poisoned the well against you very early on, and that affected our relationship." And he's just like, he's listening, and I can tell he's taking it in, but then he just changes the subject. And like I know he'll come around in his own time, but at the same time, it's like, oh geez, okay, this is why I don't like being vulnerable with you.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. This is just my experience from all the stuff that's happened with my family the last couple years, but sometimes it's good to almost like recognize what that person is capable of.
Hmm.
And for your dad, I don't know if he's capable of doing that. Not in like like a dig against him, but it's just some people just aren't.
Yeah,
And it's just to understand what that person can do and like recognize when they're doing like the best that they possibly can. If that's still not good enough, that's absolutely fine for you to feel like that. Um, but it's also just acknowledging like, yeah, they're never going to be like what I want them to be. They're just this other person instead. And I just have to try to figure that out. I feel like that more about like my extended family, honestly.
yeah,
Of just, ugh, whatever. Of just like they're there and I would rather spend time with them than not at this point. They're never gonna, I wish they would have done more when I was growing up and stuff, but I just didn't.
yeah.
And that's all I can really do about that. Um, but it is, I don't know, I always just get, ugh, I'm thinking about Annabeth's dad. I just get frustrated that like the one time that he is there for her when it fits like within the things that he's interested in.
Yeah, the
Um,
fighter plane.
yeah, like that's something that is like his special interest thing. And so
Hmm.
it's easy for him to show up in that moment and do that stuff for her because that's what he has that kind of stuff already.
Yeah,
And so he can do that. But it's just never there in a way that you would want it to be. And it's like, especially when like Sally exists in this world, like somebody who gave up her entire life basically when she was 19 to do this stuff for Percy. She just, when you see a parent like that, that's willing to do whatever to support their kid, and put all of their dreams aside for, 13, 14, however long she goes before she starts doing what she really wants. When you see like a parent not doing that, you're like, oh, you suck.
Yeah. Yeah, well, speaking of Sally too, trying to cultivate a good attachment style in your kid when you're a young parent is its own journey, especially when you know you haven't had good examples of that. Because you realize how much power is in your hand pretty quickly with little kids. Like, oh shit, this person looks up to me. They're my entire being. You get that a little bit with Lexi even,
Hmm.
where it's like, oh shoot, like if one wrong move and I can mess this kid up. And like I literally had to have a talk with William before I got on. I know you want me to cook for you, but if you get hungry, tell your dad. Like, don't wait for me to finish with this podcast and then all of a sudden say, "Oh, I'm hungry."
Yeah.
But it's both easy and hard, I would say, to cultivate that in your children. But like as a young parent, there's this extra pressure because everybody's already looking at you like you're going to mess something up. And I was 3 years older than Sally. I was in college at the time. And I still had people like, oh, you're going to mess this up. You're not going to finish school. And you're a pretty messed up person. So your kid's going to have issues. And it's like, it was a lot of pressure. And so I was like pregnant in college, both reading my classical studies texts and like parenting books at 4 a.m. Like that's how I spent most of my pregnancy. And I mean, I like to think I did an okay job. He's 12. No major issues so far. Fingers crossed. Like,
Hmm.
yeah. That I'm so Sally being able to form somewhat of a healthy attachment to Percy. I know we've said there's a touch of abandonment because of the nature of how he has to go to different schools and stuff. But for the most part, I would call their relationship pretty secure.
Hmm.
Yeah, they seem to have a really secure relationship. And I mean, and Percy has such a healthy outlook of his mother's struggles, which beautiful. Oh my God. He's like, she is the most deserving person in the world. She's the prettiest lady I know. She's the sweetest person I've ever met. She deserves everything. She should be with a millionaire. Like, which is another reason why I think kind of the attachment style and like not recognizing love is really interesting, because he quite literally, and I mentioned this to Shannon on Instagram, he never says anything about like she didn't deserve Gabe because he didn't show her love. He equated love to money.
Hmm.
Because when he was talking about Gabe and being with his mom, and I think it's on page like 32 of The Lightning Thief, he goes that she's the sweetest woman I know, blah blah blah, she should be with a millionaire. He doesn't say she should be with someone who really loves her, because for him, Gabe equals what somebody loves someone. Like that's all he knows in romantic love. And he doesn't stay in a school long enough to see it happen with other people.
Hmm.
So for him, he's like, yep, money is what equals having a better life. That's how he equates somebody who's very sweet and very nice and deserves the world. They deserve money because love means a whole lot of not shit. Essentially,
I'm
like,
just laughing because that's also me. I feel like that's every super traumatized poor person.
yeah,
Is I would just
yeah,
think like, it's still even now. I'm like, wow, all of my life like difficulties would be solved if somebody just gave me like $20,000. And I just think like I wonder what it's like to like grow up and like have money and have these like basic things and not grow up like worrying about that stuff. Like from the time I remember when the first time I can remember us moving, like we moved the third time I moved was when I was like 7. But I don't really remember the other two times because I was a tiny like 0 and also like 2 years old before that. But when we moved when I was 6, I can remember being worried about my parents being able to like afford things.
Hmm.
When I was like 6 and I was in like first grade, I was worried that they couldn't afford stuff anymore, or like they were not going to be able to pay for like the U-Haul truck or like something. There, I just remember this like feeling of being worried about money, being worried that like what if like we break something and they have to like replace it. Things that like little kids should never have to worry about, but I was worried about that from the time that I was that little, that I just knew they didn't have any money and we didn't have any money for anything ever. And
Hmm.
and it's just, since then I would just think like if I had money, I could just like run away from home. Um and I could just like take me and my sister and I could just like run away somewhere, or I could get us away from him and we would never have to see him again. But we never have any money, and so my mom felt like she had to like have him around because we didn't have anything. And
Right.
I just think like still now I just think like how much easier would my life be if I had like extra money to like where I didn't have to worry so much. Like my mom has been in a relationship with this really nice guy that is kind of similar to like a Paul kind of person, because he like takes her on these like extravagant vacations around the world because he's a retired doctor and can do that. And that's literally the personification of what I imagine that to be like, of somebody that was horribly traumatized like she was for most of her life, and then she meets this retired doctor that just like they're going to Italy in a couple weeks for like 3 weeks and just like traipse around Italy for fun. That's just like what they do. And I just think about like, wow, how much easier all of my life problems would be if I could just like have extra money. I wouldn't have to worry about paying for therapy or like paying to go to like take care of myself or just like doing little things. And I've never had that. And so that's what think of as like my, when I imagine like my happy ever after sort of thing since I was little, it's like maybe one day I'll do something where I actually have money,
Yeah.
and I won't be worried all the time about being able to afford my bills or be able to like go on vacations. Like my mom was like, "We should take you on vacation to wherever," and I was like, "Mom, I haven't left like this state in since 2015 because I haven't had money to do that." And that time when we did that was we used my dad's life insurance money when he died to go on a vacation. And so we didn't technically pay for any of it when we went on a cruise and used all of his life insurance money to go on a cruise. And so we didn't pay for any of that stuff. He paid for all of it technically. And so it's like the one big vacation I've done as an adult, I didn't actually pay for any of it really. And so that's the only time I've been able to do, like Mandy and I have never met each other
Yeah.
because we can't afford it. And my mom will ask about that sometime, and I'm like, why would we spend our time thinking about something that we can't afford doing that makes us sad? Because we wish that we could do it, but we can't do it. And and it's that kind of thing that Percy is just thinking like, yeah, we've been really poor my whole life, and my mom is in this bad situation, and I wish she could be happy. If she had money, she could get away from this guy.
Right.
And that's what is happiness to him. He doesn't know anything else, because why would he? Considering what he does know, like especially because his dad is just like this mystery person that, and he just knows that his dad abandoned him. And honestly, one of my favorite things about the show is how the thing that made me love the Percy Jackson books, like when I read the Lightning Thief for the first time in like 2010, the thing that made me love it so much was that Sally doesn't die. I
Hmm.
was like, "Oh my God, I love this book." Like I've told this story before, but when the god awful movies were coming out, I saw people on Twitter talking about it, and they obviously hated it, but I didn't know what they were talking about. And I have this thing where I like to read books of movies that are coming out before I go see the movie. And I never actually ended up seeing the movie, but I just like went to Barnes and Noble one day before work, and the Lightning Thief was there on like the little shelf for like movies that are being adapted. And so I picked up the book, and then I was almost late to work because I ended up enjoying the book so much. And I came back the next day and bought like The Sea of Monsters and Titan's Curse because I liked the book so much, and I was almost done with it basically after that one day. But a big part of what I loved about it, especially that made it like move way up in like the stratosphere of books that I loved, was that Sally survives. That the entire story is kind of about how much Percy loves her, but she's not like this martyr. She is alive and she's a part of the story and she's still there. And very much a part of his life, and isn't like this tragic figure like they usually do in a lot of books like this. She's an active person in his life. She's not like this sad story that the main character has as like a trauma thing. He doesn't need that, but it just makes the story so much better. And one thing I really liked about how they do like the Medusa episode on the show is that the reason why Percy wants to hear Medusa out is he's like, oh, my mom always said that she was a victim. And he's like, my mom wouldn't be wrong about Medusa, so I want to go listen to her. And so it's like, even with that, it's like he is willing to listen to her because his mom likes Medusa. And that's just like I hate the term the female gaze because the male gaze is so destructive. That I'm like, I don't want that the other way around. But it is like kind of like the female influence on him, that he actually like respects women and just like considers things from their perspective because he loves his mom. And it's not something that he's like actively trying to do. He just does it.
I think that is kind of forced on him because he sees how his mother approaches the world, and then the only other person he gets to see that from is Gabe. So he's like, not doing that one. He's like, I'll just follow my mom's route. So, and that's how children kind of build some of their attachment styles and build some of their personality, is like they have to have a very strong will to decide one or the other, because typically they're strongly influenced. Like, technically I should have ended up doing meth, like my siblings. I should.
I don't like, know why I'm not addicted to many substances, except for the fact that I am terrified about that, of like how they would affect my body, that I am generally don't do them because I'm afraid of what would happen if I did. That's literally why it is, but I feel like it's one or the other. Like, you either become like addicted to them or you're so scared to take them because they might affect your body in a way that you can't control.
Yeah.
But genuinely,
it takes so much like mental fortitude to break yourself out of that, especially when you don't have someone modeling that for you. It's that modeling thing again. Like, that's how we grow as children. You're modeled something and then you're like, that makes sense. It's the only thing I know, and I do that. So Percy was given these two models. He was given Gabe and he was given Sally. And we don't know how long Gabe and Sally were together. We have no idea how long. I assume probably since he was about 7. That's my assumption, because he seems to have a semblance of what it was like without Gabe in his life, but he's also 12. And he has a strong memory that Gabe really fucking sucks. So I don't know if you guys cuss on this podcast. I'm so sorry.
Oh, we do all the time.
Yeah,
I have the mouth of a sailor sometimes.
Yeah. I say it's like when I think about it, I'm like, well, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, why do I swear as much as I do? And I was like, well, I didn't know how to be angry until I was 35. And so that's a way that I can show that I'm mad. And so that's pretty much where that came from. So I just like let myself do it without feeling too bad about it. But I was just thinking something and I forgot what it was. Oh, whatever. You keep going.
But he has these two models, and he's like, Gabe makes me feel bad. So I think if I act like Gabe, I'll feel bad too. And I don't want other people to feel bad. But then he's like, Mom makes me feel good. So I like making other people feel good. And I think that's where a lot of his like strong emotional intelligence comes from. It derives from just that like need to not be like someone. And then his need to be like the other person that he was modeled after. Because he could have had another person that he was modeled to him, especially like individuals with ADHD. They're so impulsive and they're so they become so like attached to one thought process very quickly, and then that can switch on a dime. But like, say there's two models in front of you, and one is Gabe and then the other one is Gabe akin, right? Not quite Sally, not quite Gabe. somewhere in the middle where you're like, no, that would still be bad for a child. Like it's Andrew Tate or something. And
Oh
so
yeah.
you've got Gabe and Andrew Tate. Well, if that's all that he has between his like impulsiveness and his lack of stability in other areas of his life, he would most likely end up as a bad person because that's all he has modeled in front of him is that's one of the reasons why Luke pisses me off because Hermes is a bad dad. He's a terrible dad. Okay, I know people are Hermes apologists or whatever because at the end of the last Olympian, he's like, I love my kids. I miss them. I know where the rest of my kids are. I'm like, bad dad. Don't care. None of the gods are good parents. So, but like, he has a good mother who very much cares about him, except Luke didn't have like a typical childhood because May Castellan was May Castellan, and she didn't have the opportunity to formulate as her own person as a mother because Luke was a literal child. And when it came to Luke forming his own ideas and opinions and life under May Castellan after the Oracle incident, he would have had to struggle. Like, one, Hermes probably dropped in often. And it seems like he did, based on May's, some words. But he probably dropped in often. And I also think that made Luke really struggle with how he views relationships, too. Not an excuse.
No.
Just an understanding.
Yeah.
But
it is true that most like the anger that comes from with Luke that I think is true for you too, Sky, is that I'm like, you are a personal affront to me as a person. Because why did you end up this way when I know for a fact that you didn't have to be like that? Like, I could have easily been like that. Like, my dad reminds me of Kronos and Luke and Zeus and Gabe all mixed together into one horrible person. And so, like, it would be the easiest thing in the world if I ended up like that. That would have been much easier for me, actually, to end up like somebody like that instead of the person that I ended up becoming. And I generally don't know how that happened. That I grew up feeling the opposite to him instead of what he was like somehow. Because that was the only thing that I had, like, exposure to was somebody like that. Who had like total control over my life, but I somehow was just like, no, I don't want to be like you. Like, I can remember when I was like 9 and my dad was saying like homophobic stuff, screaming at him when I was 9 about him being homophobic. I grew up in an extremely like homophobic area. I don't know where that came from besides just knowing what it was like to have like your rights taken away and not wanting anyone else to feel that way. I honestly think that's where that came from, but that's why so much anger with me comes from with Luke, and I'm like, I know for a fact he didn't have to be like this. And so I get so mad when I see people who have like similar experiences to me that like end up like that, because I'm like, why did you give into it? Like, why did you just like let it happen? Why didn't you try to like be a better person? Like, why didn't you try to fight it? And especially with him, there's so many times just within like the book series itself, when we know him through like Percy, that he could have tried to stop things. Like, even just in the very first book, after he gives Percy the godforsaken shoes, like in the book version, he talks to him much more often when they're on the quest. He could have told him, like, get rid of the shoes. I found out something that's wrong with him. He didn't even have to tell them. He could have just like told him anything, because Luke or Percy trusts Luke so much at that point. He could have just told him anything. He didn't even have to own up to the fact that he tried to hurt him. He could have just made up some story and told Percy to get rid of him, and he would have gotten rid of them. And he could have stopped all of this. And yeah, he would have had to deal with like the stuff with Kronos, but it would have been a lot easier to deal with that with like everyone trying to help him with it, as opposed to how it actually goes. But he just like didn't see that as an option, because he just, like I say with him, like, he just wanted what he wanted. He was angry at what happened to him and thought that he deserved to do whatever he wanted to do because of what happened to him. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm just like, I generally don't know how you end up like that. Like I do in a like a psychological like, you know, unfeeling like super like mind logical sort of way where I'm just intellectualizing, but I just can't imagine actually doing that.
Yeah.
Because I just can't imagine me doing that. Like I just think about it, I'm like, how could I possibly end up like him? And that's like the whole thing with him is he ends up worse than the people that he's so angry at.
Hmm.
Even before the books are over, like before we even get to like the Battle of the Labyrinth, he's way worse because he's one of these kids and he's doing it to them.
Yeah.
And so it's just weird. Like I just can't imagine how he would end up like that. And his like attachment style, for lack of a better word, is just like super avoidant almost. Like doesn't want to deal with it and just will do whatever he can to not think about it.
Hmm.
That's all he really does. He just doesn't know how to figure out how to do this stuff, and so he just doesn't.
Yeah. I so someone commented, they said, did Thalia have a cabin before she became a tree? I don't remember it being mentioned. No, she didn't, because she didn't even make it into camp. They knew
Yep.
that a daughter of Zeus was coming, but she got turned into a tree before she even crossed the full border of the camp. So no, she didn't. I just wanted to make that clear. Um, my phone is on 35%, so we may have to go.
Yeah,
I
no
also have
worries.
work in the morning, and it's midnight 13.
Midnight
Yeah.
13.
Yeah, we can I mean, the one other character we haven't talked about that I'd love to touch on is Nico, because that's one where I see a lot of the fan like misinterpretations. Having gone into like rereading Titan's Curse and Battle of the Labyrinth, I I saw stuff out there of people thinking that Percy had actually promised Nico, I'm gonna protect Bianca, or like making it that Nico wasn't just a child, that like was confused about what was happening, trying to make sense of his world and all of that. But yeah, like reading that didn't actually happen. He's like, I'm gonna try my best. We'll see, because he literally could not promise that. And then we see Nico go through abandonment with Bianca. That's definitely kind of the primary thing happening with him. But it's kind of curious what's happening before that because he has nobody. Like, he doesn't remember who dropped him off at the Lotus Casino. He doesn't know who this lawyer person is that's been paying their school fees. So it's like Bianca is literally all he ever had.
Yeah, Nico is a really interesting one because he actively like runs away
Hmm.
from the possibility that people will like him.
Yes.
Like extremely avoidant in that way. Like he just convinces himself that camp won't like him and just like doesn't give them the opportunity to prove him wrong
Hmm.
for many years. Like just tells himself no, they're not going to like me anyway, and it's like my sweet child. Like you don't know that because they're telling you that they would.
Hmm.
You just don't want to you just don't want to try. And I understand why. He's a traumatized little kid who just lost Bianca and doesn't want to, lose somebody else that way, and doesn't know how to respond to any of this stuff. But it is interesting how the fandom kind of turns him into like Nico deals with a lot of traumatic things, but they almost like try to over dramatize the traumatic things that do actually happen to him by like making things worse. Like Percy's not mean to him in Titan's Curse.
Hmm.
He's really nice to him and tries to talk to him and tries to bond with him over like mytho magic cards and listens to him be a 10-year-old like little kid like info dumping on him about the different cards and tries to protect him and tries to do what he can and it doesn't like it kind of blows up in his face but he still is like trying to help him. And then especially Percy and Nico is one of the most interesting dynamics of the first 5 books to me because it's just Percy seeing himself in a little kid and trying to help him in a way that somebody didn't really have the capabilities of doing with him at the time and
Hmm.
trying to, but and like Nico not really fully realizing what's happening. And I feel like the fan reaction to him is almost like a personification of that. That there are some people that love Nico that think that like Percy is being mean to him when he's not. And it's like that kind of thing happening all over again. And I said that when when we were reading Battle of the Labyrinth that Nico Percy tries to have Nico stay innocent
Hmm.
in some way. Like he's trying so hard in that book and he succeeds. Like even at the end of the book when Nico is like not afraid of Luke finding out who he is, the only way that Nico thinks that there isn't anything scary about Luke finding him is because he's been like protected from who Luke really is and what he can do. And so that's one of those things that I think is really interesting that Nico, it reminds me of the dynamic I have with my own sister that Percy works really hard to keep him more as innocent as he possibly can. And so even though he's like super traumatized, he doesn't want him to kind of know how dangerous of a position he's actually in. And so he keeps Nico just focused on him. Of like Nico's mad at him because of what happened to Bianca. Or he's like going back and forth about trying to help Percy. And like even like the most basic things that he goes after Percy to try to help him, which is when he gets stuck in like the whole situation with Daedalus, and then when they see Luke doing everything at the end of Battle of the Labyrinth. Like he ends up there just for a very basic thing of just like, oh, Percy was nice to me and I feel bad and so now I want to go and help him. It's just a very simple way of kind of looking at things because he's still looking at it as like an actual child.
Hmm.
And even though he's gone through a lot of trauma, Percy being there kind of is almost trying to put him in like this little trauma bubble. So he doesn't have to completely lose completely his innocence the way that Percy did. And he is successful in it. Like he does even at the end of that book, he's off doing his own things, but he's also still like a kid
Hmm.
and doesn't completely understand like the huge gravity of things that he's involved in because he has people like Percy and Annabeth and stuff that are trying to help him so that he doesn't
Yeah.
realize.
I I think because of their protections, but also Nico's lack of understanding that he could have a home there, um, it's what leaves Nico so vulnerable because he's uninformed. He's making entirely uninformed decisions. And that's kind of what Percy was doing this whole time. And it was so frustrating that Percy was making all of these uninformed decisions when people should have just told him. I get that they didn't want to tell him because they're like, oh, he could decide the fate of the world. But Percy is also a child trying to make informed decisions for himself, and he doesn't even know whether living or dying is worth it. And Nico um, is getting caught up with this ghost guy, King Minos, but um, he's getting caught up with all of this with these people who want to use his powers, and he is just like, I just want to talk to my sister. I am just angry that people aren't accepting me. And so people project this like, oh, he's such a little emo goth boy. Oh my god, my little emo goth boy cinnamon roll. Blah 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 blah. Like, yes, there is some merit to that. He is a very sweet and very like innocent person, but he is also like his innocence is maintained because he's left uninformed, which leaves him open to further traumas without being able to protect himself against it, like being used by a ghost of the underworld who was a judge for a long time. It leaves them open to so many things, and it makes me think of like kind of that helicopter parent thing versus like parent lets their kids do everything. There has to be a balance between that. Nico did not get that balance either way. He
Yeah.
thrust into one and then pulled into the other, and he never got like a decent balance of like, here, experience the world, like experience a little bit. Like Percy didn't really get that either. Well, he got a pretty decent balance of it, but he shows up, and a week later after showing up to camp, he's thrust into another quest, or into a quest, like his first quest ever, and he's like, I'm 12 years old, I'm supposed to go across the entire country.
Yeah,
Like,
like what do you mean? I have
and
to do that on my own. I am in 6th grade.
yeah, and so Percy sees Nico and he's like, oh my god, like that can't happen to him. Now I gotta be the helicopter parent. But because he became kind of that helicopter parent, Nico didn't have the right tools afterwards. And that's not Percy's fault, it's not anyone's fault. But like Nico just didn't have the right tools because there's no way to prepare a child for death when they're 10 years old and you're like, hey, you're probably
Yeah.
gonna die. Um, and when you're such a powerful child like Nico, people want to use you. They used Percy. They used the hell out of Percy. They used him. They wring him dry for every little drop that he had. I mean, in the Last Olympian, it's crazy. But even in the Titan's Curse and the Battle of the Labyrinth, like, you know, they wring him dry. It's crazy that they do that to him the way they do. And Percy's like, God, this can't be Nico. I can't let this happen to Nico. And then it does, because that was the inevitability of being such a high profile child. You know, it kind of makes me think of like those children that are children of parents, like Beyonce's kid right now, Blue
Blue
Ivy.
Ivy. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, where people are like, oh my god, where's Beyonce been hiding her all these years? I'm like, she is 13. You know,
Yeah.
people are like, where, oh my god, she's a little Beyonce, where has she been? You know, but like, it's hard to get that balance where the child is like, you know, still living a relatively normal life and meeting their aspirations, but also where they're not being hypersexualized by the public eye simply because of who her mother is and like what those aspirations mean for her. And that kind of happens with Nico. Like they're essentially like the high profile, like famous children of the big three, and you know, Percy is like that famous child. He's sought after more. People try to find him. He gets stalked by monsters more than other demigod children, and he has to have more protection and security. And the same goes with Nico, because people want to use their powers for their own benefit, just like people want to use. People are like, oh, I see Blue Ivy and I can manipulate her, you know, and they probably don't actively think that, but it is kind of a thought process. They're like, oh, she's so young. Like, I want Blue Ivy coming out on stage every show now. You know, like they start making their own demands. And that's a little bit of where I worry with like these child actors and the show and everything.
Yeah.
Because people make all of these demands and these children are just developing, and then it's like, are they gonna do what I want them to do? Are they gonna wear the contacts that I want them to wear? Are they gonna dye their hair the color that I want them to dye it? And it puts a lot of pressure on them that they don't even understand developing it. So I think just Nico and Percy and Thalia, like we definitely see it with Thalia. She, like, the absolute hell pressure of being a child of Zeus, even for the like 4, 5, 6 months that she was dealing with that pressure. No, 4 months. By the time the winter solstice came around, she had only been out of her little pine cone heaven for 4 months before she became a hunter. Like, the pressure of being a child of Zeus had pushed her so far over the edge that she chose to become a hunter, then turn 16, because she didn't know if she would be able to truly remove the bias and save the gods. So these are genuinely high profile children. They are children of the most celebrity of the celebrities of the gods. And everyone wants to use them for their good instead of for the child's good.
Thalia literally is like goes on her first quest like by herself, really, ever, as like a not like a 12-year-old, and she's like, wow, this is really hard. I'm not really good at this, so I'm just gonna stop and give up like my entire adult life and just be immortal now, so I never have to do this again. It's like I try this one time, I'm not good at it right away from the start, and just is done with it because she just can't handle the stress of knowing that everyone just like that the reason why the Titan's curse is like that is because everyone just expects her by default, because she is a child of Zeus, to just naturally be a leader. They never consider that Percy would be a better leader, because they just think because she is a child of Zeus, she must be the one that's going to be in charge. And so she's like, the only way I can escape this responsibility is if I literally become immortal and like completely take myself out of it. That's the only way that she could like truly feels like she can get away from it completely. The thing about Nico I wanted to bring up about him too is how people definitely romanticize him and Hades a lot. Like, they act like Hades is such a nice dad to him or something. And there's some episode when we were talking about Bad the Labyrinth. Oh, it was like towards the beginning when Percy has his first dream thing about Nico, and he sees him like homeless by
He's
himself,
literally
like,
by the river Styx.
yeah, like scrounging up like food that he can find to eat when he's 11. And I remember I was just like, hey, Hades, fuck you. Like, fuck you. You left your 11-year-old child just like scrounging for food while he's homeless for months in the underworld that you rule, and you
hanging
just
out
left,
with Minos,
and you
and you
just
know who
left him
Minos
there.
is.
Like, he's supposed to be the good dad. Are you kidding me? Like, Hades just leaves him there. And then she doesn't remember all of this stuff, but Hades tries to pull some stuff with Percy in The Last Olympian, and I'm like, what are you doing, sir? Like, what are you doing? Have you asked your like little baby child that's like 13, maybe? I think he's still 12 at that point, like, what he thinks about you doing this to Percy in your name? Go away. Like, he is not a good dad at all. And like, the thing that I thought of once that I can like never completely get out of my mind is that the way that Hades saved Sally was like stopping her at the moment of her death. He could have done that for Bianca, but he didn't. And so I'm like, okay, you'll save Percy's mom so that you can manipulate his love for her to get what you want out of him. But when your like 12-year-old daughter is being electrocuted to death by however you're related to Hephaestus, you don't do anything at all and just let her be electrocuted to death and don't save her at the last second. Like, and I'm supposed to think that like he's like none of the gods are good parents. Can we just
No,
acknowledge
Hades
this?
is a
Yeah.
weird case, especially even like when you talk about Greek mythology, because people say like, oh, he loved Persephone only. Like there's not a lot of myths of him messing around with mortal women and stuff like that. And so people will give him this like overcorrection because there's one set of people, it's like Hades, underworld, devil. There's the other set of people that are like, oh, he's nothing like that. He's the exact opposite of that. And there's no in between. So I feel like this is just an extension of that, of people being like, well, Hades isn't that bad in Greek mythology, so he's also not a bad dad.
It's literally like there's some part of some book when after after the last Olympian, because Percy has to like absolutely shame the gods at the end and be like, you guys are horrible people. None of these people would have joined Luke if you guys were like 10% better at like what you're supposed to do. Luke would have tried to do that regardless, but nobody would have wanted to join him.
My thought
And 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 like there's this one part where they say that like Hades built like a nice place for Nico to live, and I'm like, that's the only reason why you guys think that he's a good parent is because he built him a nice room in his giant castle. And it's like, yeah, but he was homeless for like 3 years before that. So and he just like left him to deal with that before Percy like literally made the gods stop doing that. So I'm not sure that that's really something that makes him a great person.
yeah.
Yeah.
There are no good godly parents. Like Ethan Nakamura's mom, Nemesis, takes his eye. Like
Yeah.
Hades makes his son walk around with Minos for months on end, and then is like, let me kidnap your friends. And then, like, he's like, Poseidon is perceived as a good dad. No, he's not a good dad.
No,
Zeus,
I hate that man.
Hermes,
He,
people are like, yeah, Hermes is great, blah blah blah. No, no, he's not.
None of
I will
them.
say I really do have to go. It is
Yeah, we
12:32.
can wrap this up. So,
I have to shower and sleep.
we'll make
go
sure to
go.
link you when we upload this to YouTube, but if you want to tell people where to find you really quick too, we can also have a clip of that.
So I have a podcast with my best friend Heidi. It's called Fantasy Rants Pod. We will be getting back to it. I moved. He's publishing a book, so we had a lot of craziness happen. So we haven't been back on it, but we are starting up really soon. So Fantasy Rants Pod, you can pretty much find that anywhere podcasts can be found. We'll also start posting them on YouTube under Fantasy-Rants. I'm also Fantasy Rants here on TikTok and Instagram and everywhere you can think of social media. I even have a Facebook page for it. Leave the link for the really tiny camera. My friends in my comments are, I'm a small person. I'm only 5 foot. So they always make fun of me for being small. So yeah, fantasy rants pretty much anywhere. I also have a bindery. Shannon, I think you're subscribed to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of yapping on there, but I haven't lately because I had other things that required my yappage.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And aside from Percy Jackson content, she's been doing a lot of Hunger Games. So, yeah, that's a good place to check out Hunger Games content, because Shannon and I don't talk about that one as much. I haven't read the books. I know Shannon has, but
Yeah, I do a lot of Hunger Games content. Actually, arguably, I'm a bigger fan of the Hunger Games than I am Percy Jackson. Just leaving that out there. People don't really know that online, but I am a bigger fan. And I also recently did a podcast episode with Demigod Debut. If you want to go listen to that, it was the last episode for The Last Olympian. So if you want to hear me yap about children's hygiene, you can do that too.
yeah.
Yeah, that's where you can find me. Fantasy Rants, Fantasy-Rants on YouTube, Fantasy Rants on Instagram, TikTok. I have a bindery/Fantasy Rants, and then you can find me Fantasy Rants on Facebook. You can
Yes,
Fantasy
Fantasy
Rants.
Rants.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll end it here. Yeah, I can go too because I gotta get like this always runs into William's bedtime and then Shannon's phone will die. So
Yeah, my phone will also die. So I'm like, I gotta shower and I gotta be up in like 4 hours and then.
yeah, we'll let you go, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. So, we have planned for next week. We are going to bring on our friend Jean to talk a little bit more about fandom stuff, just like the concept of fandoms, what it's like to exist in fandom spaces. She's been in fandom spaces pretty much, like, I would say as long as they've existed, but I'm sure they've existed since things have
Forever.
existed. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think some of the first fandom stuff was with Star Trek in the 60s. So it's always, there's probably things from before that too. That's just what we can keep track of.
Yeah.
But Jean is Fangirl Jean on, she used to be on Twitter. Pretty sure she's not on it anymore. She's on Blue Sky now, mostly Blue Sky, and she's on here too. She's someone that has been around fandom for a long time. One story with her that I think is funny, just from how I see things, is she was somebody that I followed for like years on Twitter. And when I saw her at some point, I got on, when I got on TikTok in like 2021, I saw her and she, and I just like followed her. And then she at some point saw a video that I made and followed me back. And I remember looking at that and I was like, was that a mistake?
Disorganized attachment right there.
Yeah, and I was like, is she sure about that? Like, is she sure that she wants to follow me? Because I was like shocked because I had watched her for years mainly talking about Star Wars back then, because that was when the last trilogy was coming out. But it was like I just respected her a lot and was like so surprised, and still am to this day, even though she's a friend of mine now, that she even wants to listen to anything that I have to say. And so she's great, and talking, she's somebody like me that's been in fandom spaces for a really long time. We can understand a lot of it. The whole Epic the Musical thing was a good example to talk about it, because that is a good example of a very toxic fandom. Which, like, speaking of that, I wanted to talk about this when Sky wasn't here, because she's a fan of Epic, and I didn't, that fandom is
Yeah.
crazy.
We won't make her feel bad for that. It's
No,
not her fault. The
but
fandom's terrible.
it's more like a thing of I don't want people to get somehow upset at her, because she's just like there when we're saying things about it that people get upset about. But the whole Danny Mata thing's been really interesting, because he reacted to Hold Them Down and said what we would have wanted them to say, and I was like, what? And that was like shocking that he did that. And so talking about using that fandom as an example of like why fandoms can get to a very toxic place when they like stanify the person that is kind of in charge of it, is kind of what we'll be talking about, because it is like a very interesting thing to see how those communities get created and get to such a toxic place. And the thing that is always interesting to me about these different communities is that they don't have any like self-awareness of like what they're like. And that's the most interesting thing about them, is that like Nicki Minaj fans think that what they do is like completely fine. They don't think that they're like the villain at all. And they don't, and it's like almost fascinating to see how a community of people can get to that place. And it's also fun as being part of around the Percy Jackson fandom to kind of see a fandom that doesn't do that doesn't get to that toxic place, and trying to figure out why it doesn't.
Well, and we've talked about this a little bit, and it's that Rick and Becky are good at keeping people in check. And it's not necessarily like they say something and then people don't do stupid stuff, but it's the case where we started off this podcast asking Sky about book prices. That's something that was brought to our attention from Becky, being like, hey, why is this signed copy of The Lightning Thief $200? Like, that should not happen. So that's her putting her fandom in check. Is that off, or is the seller gonna change their price? Probably not. You know, it's probably not somebody who is literally a fan. But at the same time, that is her telling the fandom, hey, this is something that's important to me, and here's why.
Yeah, and even today with the whole thing going on with that, you know, the whole rumors and stuff, like she was trying to like make me feel better. And I was like, what is going on that you are trying to console me right now? Stop it. But she was doing that because I just said it's just infuriating how these things happen and people don't think about what's going on. And she basically just said, like, you know, everything with Percy Jackson is under a big microscope. And she basically said, in the grand scheme of things, considering all these other things that are going on in the world, this isn't like, you know, that big of a deal. And she was basically trying to say, like, don't try to worry about this stuff too much, because in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, because there's so many other big things going on that these kind of leaks and stuff are not the things they're really spending time worrying about. They're just worrying about, like, what's going to happen with them being able to make this kind of stuff at all, like, going forward. And I was just like, it's ridiculous that the wife of, like, the person that is Annabeth, who helped create this series, is, like, trying to make me feel better about people doing something about this series that she put her life into that I care about. And I'm like, what is going on? And it's just like that general idea that they take the time to do that stuff. And it's not in a self-aggrandizing way, like, and I don't know how else to put that, but, like, you know how some creators will, like, share things about, like, their creation, but it's like, it's so cool that this thing that I wrote made you guys do this sort of thing. But with them, it's more of, like, a thing of, it's really cool that you feel this way, and I just want to, like, support the people that like our stuff. Like, 35% of the time she's on Threads is her just telling people that she's listened to their podcast before, and then us sitting there staring at her like, what do you
What?
mean? Like, I've seen her do that a couple times, besides when she did it with us in the last couple weeks, and it's every time the person's like, oh my god, what? And she's just like out there just like consuming this content because she just genuinely enjoys it, and likes telling people that kind of thing, the way that she doesn't say it in a very like assuming way. She just says it because she's like, yeah, I like listening to your podcast.
Hmm.
And that's the end of the story. And because it's coming from her, it feels a lot more, but she's not saying it in a way of like, I am so amazing, look at
Yeah.
this amazing thing that I created. And so it makes, I feel like, a fandom that like sees that in them and wants, and like instead of wanting to do things that's like a kind of like a toxic thing to like impress them or like make them love them or whatever,
Hmm.
instead it comes from a place of like you want to do something that that they would respect if they found out about it,
Yeah.
kind of feeling. And that makes it just overall a better place. But it is because they're there. Um, they're not just like leaving us, dear God. I don't even want to think
Yeah.
about what kind of things would be happening,
Well,
like
and
rumor
I'll
wise, if
say
they
it so
weren't
that you
there.
could clip me, but with Danny Mata, what ended up happening was that he watched Hold Them Down. And he was like, this is 100% just for shock value, which was the entire point Shannon was trying to make. I need to say that for the people that wanted to act like you were doing anything else. Your entire point was this is gratuitous. This man wrote this musical so that it would take off on this app. And this is what he chose to put in it, a whole chorus that is so explicit that, like, you can't listen to it without some measure of shock. And so he pointed that out. He has people in his comments on YouTube arguing with him the same way that they argued with us. I mean, I even saw the same argument that was rehashed with me in there of like, this happened. This literally happened in the Odyssey. And I will say it again. Line number. Tell me the line number that it happens in that last book of the Odyssey if it happens, okay? But yeah, it doesn't happen. It doesn't literally happen in the Odyssey. And so him saying that, it was validating to us. Like Shannon showed me the clip before she posted it, I think, or like around the same time because it's you literally posted the exact same thing. So I'm like, oh, she screen recorded the exact same thing she sent to me, and
Hmm.
it's just it's validating to have someone be like, oh, this is true, because yeah,
It
it was
was
hard.
the thing about Danny that was especially validating was first off the fact that he has over 1 million subscribers, and so if they want to come at him in the same way they came at me, that's a very that would be very like exposing for them.
Mhm.
And so that's not what they want to do. And so they're kind of like forced to be more rational about it all. But he also told them beforehand that he is also a sexual assault survivor.
Mhm.
And so you really don't want to come after somebody that's in a really public place that just told everybody that he is, because he felt like you as a fandom would understand where he was coming from.
Yeah.
You don't want to prove that that's not true. And the things that he said was just literally the exact things that I was trying to say. And the whole thing about that situation that was like out of this world was that I wasn't even trying to say like this is the only thing that you can think about this song. I was just trying to say like this is how I feel about it, and it's not like an irrational crazy thing to
Mhm.
feel this about this sort of song. That's all I was ever trying to say. And like when people are harassing you about such a simple thing, you have to like triple double like down on it, because they're being so aggressive with you that if you show like any sort of weakness, they just like eat you alive. And so in
Yeah.
that situation, you can't sit there and just talk about things. But like that's all he was saying in that clip was like, yeah, I totally get why people like that, like why they don't want to listen to this song, why they don't feel like it was worth it for it to be in this musical, because it is gone way too far. And he makes the point that I felt like was such a good point that he made, was he says like, you know, sexual assault in media can be like the first time that you feel seen and understood, but like writing this in purely just to make the villain look more villainous doesn't make anybody feel seen or heard. And I'm like, it's literally that simple. That is all we were ever trying to say. And there were people that still show up in my comments being like, oh, that's you. You're that girl. Like 6 months later. And it's like, he summed up what I was trying to say in a minute and a half in his video. And that's all we were ever trying to say was like, yeah, it's very obvious that it wasn't written from a place with like victims in mind. It was written from a different, like more shock value kind of place. And if you're okay with it and you're a victim yourself, that's fine. But I think it's understandable why some people wouldn't be. And especially if you don't feel like that personal attachment to the creator already. And that's all that really was. Like doesn't know that much about he didn't know that much about Greek mythology or epic in general either going into it in the same way that we didn't. And so it's like if two different people who are both sexual assault survivors go into this and have that general reaction, I think it's like I just want them to understand that this is like an option.
Yeah.
It's just that's all it's ever been is like just let people feel this about this song. Like if you're going to write a song like that, I think it's worth it, or you have to understand that some people just like won't like it.
Yeah.
And if the worst thing we ever say is that like I don't think that he's good at writing female characters because he described Penelope the way that he does in that song right after you see her for the first time in the song before that, I think that's a valid statement to make. That's not like out of this world. And so the fact that he ended that clip saying like, you know, I don't think that's like an out of line statement to make, that you don't feel like this song is worth it. And the first time I saw that, I was just like, is this real life? Like, did he actually just say that? Because that was basically what they harassed me over, was they thought that what I said could never possibly be true.
Yeah.
Like the videos they made, they were calling me like insane and things like that. And so just he said it so easily and so simply that I was like, wow. I hope that he's okay after this. I hope that they leave him alone. But that was a great thing to get back. I always wish when things like this happen that people would realize this stuff when it's happening to me. And it's this complex that I have that like months later people will realize that like something I said was like right. And it's like, why can't you realize it in real time when it's happening to me? Why do you only realize it when somebody who you think is like more important or whatever than me? Then you realize it when it's not me. Why can't you realize it in the moment? Like, why can't you see like the humanity in me? Like that's why after the whole Medusa stuff happened, after the epic stuff was brought up again, I was like, I'm not talking about like this kind of thing on TikTok, at least for a long time. And I like almost don't even want to talk about it anymore for a while overall, because it's like you guys treat me so badly in a way that you almost don't think that I'm a person. And don't think about how the things that you say would affect me, and they affect me a lot. And so it's like, I don't know why you can understand that about other people, but you can't when it's me, and I'm tired of trying to figure out why that happens. Because it just keeps happening.
Like, and I've said this before, like that very first video that you made, stitching me, where it was like, is this person mad at me? No. And if I take a minute to listen, oh my gosh, she's actually saying something that is super helpful, a perspective I've never considered. So I ended up, because back then I couldn't stitch a stitch or something like that, I ended up screen recording you and literally just uploading your whole thing. And I don't know, I gotta do the golden child thing of like, don't mess with my scapegoated sibling, because like, because people don't take you guys seriously. And when it comes to some of the stuff, like the Medusa stuff, for example, I'll come into your comments and I will, I'll be like factual, because that's how a lot of these people that are highly academic think. And so I'm like, okay, let me just throw a like line from poetry at them. Let me just throw, like, I got to the point where I literally threw Greek ancient Greek at somebody in her comments recently. But and they never come back at me. That's the thing that bugs me about it, is like if I start trying to talk to the people that are causing problems in Shannon's comments, they just like immediately stop. And it's like, what
Mm-hmm.
about me when I say this is different than her saying it? And also, like, pick on somebody your own fucking size, okay? I'll say it that way because they think that they're bigger and better because they have a degree. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I will say it right here right now. I think you're smarter than me. I do. I think that a lot of people that don't have degrees are smarter than me, and it's because of the way that you guys receive information. It's the way that you guys read, the way that you critically engage with things. Like those are the things that tell me, oh, this is an intelligent person, not what degree they have, especially when it's more of a humanities degree than like a science or a math degree.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you can quantitative like qualify, oh, you have a science degree, so you know this much. But it doesn't, like humanities, it's just reading books and writing essays. That's like literally all our degree are. Like I paid $120,000 at least to read books, read the essays people have written on those books, and then write my own essays from both of those things. Like
I,
that was what my education was.
I think that's why part of that stuff is hard, is because I'm like, yeah, I would have loved to go to school and like
Hmm.
gotten a degree, but I did not have like the choice to do that because of how
Yeah.
traumatic my life was. It was not possible. Like when I went to college, I had a total mental breakdown
Hmm.
after like 2.5 years because I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't remember most of my life and I didn't know how to do anything, and I didn't want anyone to know that I didn't know how to do anything. Um,
Hmm.
and so I was pretending all the time and I just couldn't handle it. And so after
Yeah.
2.5 years, I just stopped going. It would have been so much fun if I would have been able to go to college and like take history classes like that for fun and like actually done a degree in something that I genuinely like wanted to do.
Yeah.
And but I didn't have the chance to do that. And so it feels really just really mean to for people to, I can tell they just assume that they know more than me because they have a degree or something, and and then be like throwing that in my face about what we talk about with Medusa. And it's like the reason why I like Medusa so much is why I don't have this thing that you think matters more than
Hmm.
anything else. And it feels really mean that you're using that as like something to get back at me at.
Yeah.
Um, and it just gets to be too much sometimes of like, I don't know why people always come just at me. And it's like
Yeah.
every time something happens is always at me, and every time it happens I'm like, I never thought when I made that video that I did that some classics person would like come at me like that, because I thought that video was like making a good point of like, yeah, why do you guys just assume that Rick Riordan or anyone else don't know these things? You just assume that
It's
like so
because he's
many,
not playing the game right. It's
yeah, and like
because,
so many
yeah.
people just assume, even with me, they just assume that I don't know that there's more than one Medusa myth, and it's like I know about all of her different myths. I know about every single one. This is just the one that I like the most because it fits my life experience.
Shannon is
And
just as capable of going on to theoi.com and like reading every single excerpt that has her in it, just like
mhm.
all of you guys do, and then pretend you have read all of these works in total. Like,
Yeah,
we all know the truth.
yeah, and it's just overall that whole experience was just, that's why I'm just like I don't want to talk about this at all anymore because it's like I don't, it was a hard thing, I guess. It's hard to be a sexual assault survivor, victim, whatever you want to call yourself on the internet, because nobody ever listens to you for one reason or another. Like there's
Hmm.
someone mentioned that somebody was a survivor in my comments the other day that I, yesterday or today, one of those days, that I didn't realize was at the time.
Hmm.
And so though that person and me made content in like a polar opposite sort of way, like they made content about, it was about the same general thing,
Hmm.
but they were making it still talking about the same thing that I was about abuse, but they were talking about it from like more like a, like trying to get people to understand where they were coming from sort of place, and like didn't tell people that they were a survivor for some, it seems like for a little bit they didn't mention it.
Hmm.
And instead, with like me, I mention it right away, and I'm like really blunt about everything because I feel like that's the best way for people to understand me. And neither one of us were actually listened to.
Yeah.
And so it just shows that even if you like say things in a nicer way and you don't tell people where you're coming from to try to get them to understand until you have to tell them because you feel like you have to, versus me telling them right away and just being really blunt about it all, no matter what you do, people don't want to listen to you.
Hmm.
And so it just leaves you in this place of like, I don't know what to say anymore. And the whole reason why I always would post Medusa is because I just love her story. But I also just thought it was worth it for other people who have been through similar things to have somebody like her
Hmm.
as something to just make them feel better, especially during
Yeah.
this time. And then it just became a point of like, no, it's just not worth it. It's because there's
Yeah.
always some people that say the most hurtful things to me that ruin all of the nice things that those posts get. That is just not worth it, and it does make me sad that I feel like I just can't talk about her. But
Hmm.
to be fair, that other person I'm talking about feels like he can't talk about the thing that he was talking about either. And generally like doesn't because of the same sort of reaction.
Yeah.
And so I don't know necessarily how the internet could possibly stop treating people like us like that. I don't even know if they want to, but
Yeah.
it's just overall that's the kind of thing that happens with us, and it just leaves you in this very weird place where you just feel like you can't talk about any of the things that you want to, and you
Hmm.
just kind of hope that the people who need like that sort of message just somehow get it, even if you can't actively post about it anymore.
Yeah. And I will say like this has almost been confirmation bias of me of why I was initially like really hesitant to post about Greek mythology content was because I knew people would be that pedantic. So like my like watching you go through it, I've had to tell myself like okay, but we're not engaging with mythology on the level that these people are trying to hold you to because they're trying to hold you to like research standards.
Mm-hmm.
And that is messed up because even me, as somebody who has, like the background enough to do it in the way that would make them completely happy, I'm not doing that shit. I'm talking about a story that makes me happy, like, or
Yeah.
that makes me feel seen in this case. And so it sucks because it's like, you should be talking about this. We should all be talking about we should all be talking about the fact that the reason this part of the myth, this version of the myth, and even the feminist spins on the myth have happened is because sexual assault survivors don't have any autonomy. Like they don't feel like they do. And so being able to say, "Oh, I don't even want you to look at me, so I'm going to turn you to stone if you look at me wrong." Like it's a superpower. It is.
And
And
well,
yeah.
I think the thing too about it is just how I think.
Hmm.
There are things that I see like literally every day that remind me of like what these different myths are based on. Like
Hmm.
I see videos from people every day of people who are talking about, being abused and trying to figure out how to like continue on with their life. That reminds me of Medusa.
Hmm.
There was a story that we'll talk about later, like not right now, about a situation of a female influencer that absolutely like groomed and was sexually assaulting a child
Yeah,
in
we're
front of
still looking
everybody.
into that.
And like I remember that story because when I saw that video about it, I was like, yeah, that's absolutely what's happening, and people are just letting it happen because it's a girl doing it instead of a guy. And I knew that at the time and just like stopped paying attention to anything else about it because it was like too hard to like see it, knowing that that's what was going on. The victim recently came forward with his story, so people actually took him seriously, but he shouldn't have had to do that in order for people to just acknowledge what was very obviously happening.
Yeah.
But like when I see that sort of story, I'm like, yeah, that's Calypso.
Hmm.
Like that's who that myth is like based on. And so when I see like people being hurt, or even like people in Percy Jackson, like the characters of Percy and Nico and stuff representing people that you know in your real life, it's like I have a hard time when people just like want to shut that down because to them it's not what they think matters. And it's like, well, if you love mythology because you just love the idea of like knowing what the people who originally wrote these stories were going for, and that's like what you think is like beautiful about it, I can understand that. But a lot of people find it beautiful to talk about it as ways to like show the different sides of humanity
Hmm.
instead, and like to learn more about yourself and other people. As
Yeah.
more time goes on, you can like look at these stories and see more things as you get to know ourselves and what we're capable of. And so that's what I think is beautiful about these stories, and those two things can exist at the same time
Hmm.
if you allow them to.
Yeah.
That's
Like,
always the thing.
you guys will notice if you ever watch any of my mythology videos where it is this like hotly debated, there's this version and this version. Um, I will say both versions exist, but this is the one that I like for this reason, and it's usually a humanistic reason. Which brings me to like the last point I want to make on this podcast, which like is so the classicist who decided to make a huge rant against Shannon was talking about Ovid as a misogynist. And that's something I just like did not even get into in our Ovid like deep dive because in my opinion the people's reasons for saying that he is a little murky. And so it's usually because the people that say it are intense Athena lovers. And they don't like that his version of Arachne has Arachne winning and then Athena punishing her anyways. Or that we have this Medusa myth where she punished a survivor of something instead of the person doing it. And the other reason they'll say is because a lot of his stories focus on women's pain. Well, I mean, you think about like if you read, let's say, I'm trying to think who would be a good example. Hyginus or Apollodorus, people who wrote libraries of mythology, and it's like all of these different versions of the stories exist. They're written almost clinically. Like they're written like, okay, this person left this person betrayed this person, and then we move on. But Ovid's the one who sat there and wrote a collection of stories of the girls left behind by heroes and was like, this is what they felt in the moment that they got left. This is what they felt afterwards. These were the types of things they were worried about. And to me, that does not scream misogynist. That screams a man who recognizes that women are a lot of the times the victims in these stories and they don't get treated like victims.
Hmm.
And so lending a voice to them. And I'm sure there's somebody with a degree that's going to be like, "Well, you're wrong because of blah 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 blah." I don't care. Every time I read Ovid, I just find he's funny that he does care about these things that are happening to the people in the myths a little bit more so than everybody else. And that is why I think that we in particular, like we will always circle back to Ovid in a way because it is the version that does that the best.
Yeah. And honestly, like saying that Ovid is a misogynist because he like focuses on the women that are hurt in these stories. It's like almost like a comparison. This is gonna sound weird, but it's like the comparison of like Hold Them Down to a scene that happened in Andor, like the Star Wars show that I really need to watch.
Hmm.
But there was a scene in that season and the season that just came out where somebody tried to sexually assault another character, but
Hmm.
it's shown to be like a very like it's a beginning of like a violent scene. Like the character tries to do it to the girl, she literally like fights back, and so then it turns into like an actual like fight. And after it's over and she's telling somebody else about what happened, she says like to the person like he tried to rape me, as a way to like show that it's not, they're not showing it as like a romantic thing. They're showing that it was just about power and domination and violence, which is what rape actually is, but a lot of times it's not depicted that way in media. And
Hmm.
so like that is like showing like sexual assault, but like showing it from the perspective of the person that's experiencing it, and showing it as a way to show like how bad this other person is. But like in Hold Them Down, it's purely there just to be like shocking. There isn't, you
Yeah.
don't learn anything new about Penelope. You don't even learn anything new about Antinous, like the
Antinous, yeah.
villain. you don't learn anything new about anybody. It's just like more traumatic information that you didn't need, especially because none of it actually happens and Odysseus kills them all before anything actually takes place. And so that's what that feels like. To say that Ovid is a misogynist because he focuses on how women are harmed, like isn't that what people want? Like for people to like center like women's perspective on thing, or like the marginalized communities, like any marginalized community's perspective on things, instead of just telling like the same story from the people in power over and over again. It's always confusing to me how they don't realize that. Like that girl made a whole video saying that Poseidon had consent to do whatever he wanted with Medusa, and obviously there was consent. There was never a question that there wasn't consent. And I'm like, your overall like argument is that a man in like huge amounts of power could never possibly sexually assault a woman. That's your basic argument. And
Yeah.
you don't realize how you sound like somebody from the 1940s. It's
Yeah.
so like old and like archaic way of thinking of looking at sexual assault, of the idea like, oh, Poseidon just got consent because they had sex in a field, and that field can be like seen as like a positive thing. And there's
That's
like,
like the stupidest take too.
it's just so like
Yeah.
simplistic way of thinking of like, you spent how many years in school and this is like all you got out of this scene, that you couldn't think about any
Yeah,
other
meadow does
perspective.
not necessarily mean consent. Let's look at Persephone getting taken literally from a meadow while she's picking flowers.
It could just mean that she's like virginal, like
Yeah, it's more a
innocent.
virginity metaphor. You're right.
There's so many
Um,
different things it could possibly be, and it's just such like an old, like, it's a very old way of thinking, by I mean like what society thinks about these things now.
mhm.
If I don't think that any of those people would be saying that about any other story if it wasn't like in a myth. And so it almost, to me, it like weirdly like almost shows how backwards that sort of like world is, by the fact that the big prevailing theory is telling different abuse victims that they're wrong about something because of something.
Yeah.
And it's just like that sort of thing just like doesn't happen in the same way anymore, but that's completely accepted in that community. And so it's just like things are so backwards there, and and I don't, and they're never going to like change if they just tell people really meanly over and over again that they're wrong every time you're like presented with a new idea. But it is just like a weird thing to see like a 21-year-old girl emphatically argue with me that that Medusa could never be a rape victim, and was like excited about telling me that I was wrong about thinking that she could be. And it's like, you can't ever say that definitively about anybody. You can never just say that, no, you weren't raped, because you're not the person that went through that experience. You can
Yeah.
never say that about anyone,
It's
even
so
fictional
pedantic.
people.
So I can also probably tell you where this comes from, and it's that unlike in Percy Jackson, there's not a lot of delineation between the different divinities. Like I even mentioned this in Calypso, she's referred to as goddess even though she's a
Mm-hmm.
naiad. And so you have like Thea used for goddess everywhere, right? Although I don't think that that's the case with Medusa at all. Like Gorgon is the official like what she is, and that's considered monstrous. Chronologically, it's before the Olympians, but the Olympians are ruling at this time. So they're like
Mm-hmm.
ruling class of immortals, no matter how you spin it. And she's not immortal. That's the whole reason why they were going after her in the first place. But all of this is just stupid and silly. It doesn't necessarily need to be said, in my opinion, because it's just like one of those things. By writing so hard for it, fellow classicists, I will speak to you. By writing so hard for Medusa was never a victim, what you're doing is essentially going into victims' comment sections and saying,
Mm-hmm.
victimness is invalid. And here's all of my reasons it's invalid. And it has to do with a guy that lived like over 1,000 years ago that you're never going to meet, who you think was acting against a ruler who you probably wouldn't have liked. Like, let's be real, you guys wouldn't have liked Augustus. And so, what are we doing here? You know,
Yeah.
and I'll say it one more time. You could pin this to your profile, Shannon. Pick on somebody your own fucking size. Like classicists. Pick on somebody your own size. I have the degree. I will go into the Latin. I will go into the Greek, and I will argue with you.
Hmm.
You do it to Shannon because you think that she doesn't know what she's doing. And I still get mad about that one person during the Epic of Musical stuff who's like, oh, she just wants to use her friend's degree. Use my degree. Use it. I don't care. Use my expertise. And like, I'm not saying that I'm some huge expert at the same time. Like, I am also fallible, but I'm part of why I say the thing to begin with about humanities and having humanities degree just essentially being certified that you read is because I've seen the progression in my life of people not being able to go to college. Like, I've seen some of the people that were the brightest at my high school then have to go straight into work because they, whatever home circumstances or
Hmm.
whatever, and never get to pick that education back up. And it's not that they're wasted potential. I would never say that about any of them, you know? But it is that life didn't bring them to a place where having an education was something they could do. Like, whether it be because of time, money, doesn't matter. Um, I realize how immensely privileged I am in getting to finish my degree, especially when I had my son in junior year. Not a lot of people have the support to do that kind of thing. And so I will never begrudge somebody for not having a degree. Like, unless you're operating on me, I'm not gonna worry about what your degree is.
Yeah. And like, and ironically, the people that were saying all that stuff to me about Epic the musical stuff, like Jorge doesn't have a degree in
No, he
anything to
doesn't.
do with the arts.
He
He got a
probably like
degree.
skimmed the Odyssey. Like, let's
Yeah.
be real, that man barely knows the Odyssey.
Yeah, he barely knows it at all. And I'm pretty sure, like weirdly, I'm pretty sure that the reason why he describes Calypso as like a child and oh, she's been trapped on this island since she was a kid, I'm pretty sure he's just taking that from Percy Jackson,
Yeah,
which
he's
is like
like, I
so
saw this
ironic
lore
considering
in
that they're
Percy
like
Jackson.
you just know the Odyssey from because you read Percy Jackson. And like I'm pretty sure that's where Jorge got it from. I'm
Yep.
pretty sure
He
because the like
literally has Calcus say the exact opposite thing that he's
mhm.
supposed to say in the underworld. Like, he's not supposed to be told in the underworld, you're never gonna make it home, fuck you. He's
Mhm.
supposed to actually get hope by going in the underworld.
And it's just yeah, I don't know. I think that the way that the beginning part of the first Calypso song is the exact verbatim things that Calypso and Percy say to each other and Bow the Labyrinth, like almost the exact same lines. It's
Yeah,
just the
like,
word
hello,
Penelope instead
sleepyhead.
of yeah, it's just Penelope instead of Annabeth, but it's literally the exact same and oh, she's my friend instead of she's my wife. That's the only difference between those parts. And so I'm like I'm pretty sure that he just did that, which like if your fandom isn't viciously attacking people for just like saying that you don't like a writing choice that he made, that would be fine. Like
Hmm.
go off, dude. Like do whatever you want. But it's just the way that they act, which makes it such a hard thing because you feel like we'll talk about this next week, but it's more of just a thing that you feel like you're going crazy because all you're trying to do is get them to acknowledge that this like critique that you have is just something that a rational person could want to say.
Yeah.
And then they get around to the point where they start admitting like, well, yeah, this is an adaptation, so this is how he changed it. And I'm like, what have we been talking about this entire time? That's what I've been trying to say this whole time is that
Yeah.
he changed the story this way and this is my critique of those changes.
Yeah, and that's what I kept getting into circular arguments with people when this whole thing went down, was because I did try to like come into your comment section with here's a line number from the Odyssey. You guys are saying this shit happened that didn't happen. Here is where this goes down in the book. Tell me where your version happens. And like they would then be like, "Oh, well, it's an adaptation." Okay, but you were saying it literally happened. So which one? Is it literal or is it not? And they were playing that game all day and like everything would be fine if you guys would just admit it's an adaptation. Jorge made choices, and some of those choices actively ruined the story. Just a little bit. Just a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Okay? I won't begrudge the fact that he made an adaptation of the Odyssey into a musical. Like, that was cool. There were certain songs that I was digging it. There really were. But yeah, there were other songs where I was just like, why are we doing this? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even Madeline Miller, somebody who went through classics, I had critiques of her of like, why is your Achilles not angry? Like, it's so fundamental. But at the same time, that got a bunch of people reading the Iliad. I
Mm-hmm.
don't, the only thing that I have against the Epic the Musical is that I don't think that, that fandom is encouraging people to go read the Odyssey. They're encouraging people to go cherry pick through source material so they can try to support Jorge's vision.
Yeah,
Um,
the opposite has happened where people are
yeah.
making. I've seen people because the Epic fandom was watching my content for so long. I always see videos of them talking about stuff, and I've seen videos in the last couple months of them saying that like now there's like a bunch of Epic fans who think that Jorge's version is better than the Odyssey, and they
Oof.
don't think the Odyssey is that good of a story because they think that Jorge's version is better, and it's turned into like this whole weird thing where fans of the Odyssey are trying to like point out the changes that he made,
Mhm.
and it not even like in a bad way, just like trying to point out the changes that he made, and they just like don't want to hear it, and they're like so sure that his version is just better than the original story. And it's like you like this other version so much that you can't look at the original story in like an objective lens, and like even fans of it are getting frustrated by that sort of attitude.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it is a ridiculous thing to say that this guy's version, when this is like the first musical he ever wrote. Like I said this to
As a
somebody when
20
somebody was
something
like,
year
he is
old
a
over
master at his
quarantine.
craft, and I'm like, he's 26. Like this is like I would be depressed if the best thing I ever made creatively was when I was 26 years old, and I never improved after that.
Yeah. Seriously. I do got to get going to get William to
Yeah.
bed. So for next week, like I said, we have Jean coming on. We're going to talk fandom culture, which will be a great time to rehash some of this Epic the Musical stuff. And yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about what we're doing beyond that. We do like the idea of having guests, so we'll throw it out there once again if anyone wants to come on and talk about any of the topics we've mentioned so far in our podcast. We're open to that. I have a few ideas of other stuff we could do. Like, I
Hmm.
think it'd be fun to watch all of the memories from Breath of the Wild again and talk about
Oh
the
yeah.
through storyline. And we could do all of the Zelda stuff that's a little bit more recent.
Hmm.
Um, but that's mostly when we don't have guests. And then of
Hmm.
course we'll keep you guys up to date on show news, anything that comes out, any rants that Becky goes on threads.
Yep.
Yeah, but we'll leave it here for tonight, and Shannon will have all of Sky's info in the description of this video on
Hmm.
YouTube.
Go follow her. Thank you and goodbye.
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.